Yep. Nope. Testing, testing.
Do the audio test. Let me know when you're ready to record.
Ron, you bet. You all been.
I have to hit cancel first. All right. Yep. And then, yep. All right. Now hit test.
This came up. Sure.
Maybe it came out of it might have came out of my bag, I guess. Stick it in there.
Hi, how are you? Good.
If you want to look at, this one has a bunch of shit in it, but it's got the licenses in it. License thing, jurisdiction. If any billing stuff comes up, it's in the last part of this one.
Computer, is that what you're saying?
No, I've just got them hard copied. I can send them to them if they want them, but.
There.
Third, nine. Up to eleven. But that's it's that way. Third minutes. Figured out.
Yeah, they quit doing that. After one of them got through it, they quit doing it.
You liking it over here? Yeah. I haven't been over to 444 in a while. Yeah. Yeah. There's always something going on.
Okay.
Thank you, Matt.
And I will, shoot you an email with our contact info. Okay.
Good snacks?
All right. Thank you very much.
Are we live? Can you hear me?
I can.
You know, we need to get a life. This is the way you spend your Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock.
Yeah, right. Well, it's a hot day out there.
What's going on, man? How are you? Good to see you.
Brother?
Hey, Kelly, how are you doing? How are you?
Oh, well, older. I wanted to hang out. Are we gonna, you know, that's how I
Yeah.
know.
When I grow up, I want to be Kelly Jones.
No, let me tell you, there's only three things that I measure my life by. Over about what I want. You gotta remember. Hey, you gotta cut my grass. All I need in. There.
I
don't tractor and put my music.
that's exactly where I am. Like every,
Don't.
it's a 1 hour exercise and can't bother daddy. You'll have to just leave me alone because this is a dangerous tool.
A guy posted a meme yesterday. It said, let me give you some good. What's for dinner? Mowing the yard. Single. Oh, I don't have to have a lawnmower and have to keep it in the garage. How y'all doing? I'm good. How are you?
Yeah. That's about 10 billion.
That's not automatic. I don't know the whole story, so can I give an opinion? Oh, it doesn't hear you.
Ron and Terry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Somehow I got booted out.
I'm not. Yeah. Yeah, there was a special event. That's good stuff. I think it was. Oh. I like it. Yeah.
Well, that would be right, though. Right, not this, the discount would be counted. Baby.
Good afternoon. We're going to call the meeting to order. Let's call the roll, please.
Chair Nemeth,
Here.
Co-Chair Jones.
Here.
Senator Neal, Senator Adams, Senator Nemeth, Senator, Representative Fleming, Representative Stevenson, Councilman Piagentini, Councilman Arthur,
Present.
Councilwoman Fowler, Mary Ann Butler,
Here.
Shelby Somerville,
Here.
Scott Schuberger,
Here, present.
Mayor Jewel, there, Chief, a town chief,
Here.
East Rock.
I'm here.
What about this?
Okay. Okay. I think we have some, the first order of business today is the submission of the reports, I believe, by the two committees. Are the chairs here and ready to submit their reports or to address the reports that they have submitted to the commission?
Yeah, hi, Scott Schoenberger, lead on the GAPS committee. So this is not quite complete. There's one more component to finish specifically on the hard gap side. So this report has broken down the gaps as it relates to soft gaps and hard gaps, as we've discussed before. Soft gaps came from the public hearings that we held, from comments from all 6 of the public hearings. That's broken down into 5 specific categories. One is public safety or police services. Second is public transportation or TARC. Third is streets and street repair. Fourth is the belief that the urban service district is subsidized by the urban cities and the unincorporated areas. And the fifth one is that the suburban cities and unincorporated areas are subsidized by the urban service district. So there were also a few other areas that were discussed that did not fit, one being public schools, another being garbage collection, and then the third being zoning. So there was a frequency of commentary in the comments, which is why I felt that it was appropriate to list that in the report. The report did not go through and represent every comment that was made. That would have made I would have very easily just been able just to publish the report. So it references the documents that have been put on the website, as well as the public testimony. But you will see that they are broken down with public safety going first. And then it also reflects the date, the person making, whoever the person was that was making the statements, the date of the meeting or when it was posted on the system, and then the council district that they represented. So I wanted to make sure, or we wanted to ensure, or I will just say I did, I wanted to make sure that there was a variety of districts that were represented so that it wasn't skewed in any one single direction. And that there was some consistency throughout the report. It will change a little bit as it relates to the subsidization perspectives on the soft gaps, because obviously if you're in the USD, you're primarily commenting on subsidizing the suburban cities and the unincorporated area. And if you're in the unincorporated area, the perception was that you are subsidizing the urban service district. So then moving on to hard gaps. The hard gaps, and again, I apologize, the last element on state road funding, which I'll get to in a minute, was not quite completed, and I'll explain that towards the end. The first one is emergency management services. And what that's focusing on specifically is the routes that had gone on, the frequency of the routes, or not the frequency, but the amount. And I broke that down into dispatches, then units arriving, and then transports. Key thing to note is that at the consolidation or the merger, EMS was supposed to be countywide. I included some testimony that we had received in our last meeting from Colonel Reardon, and then also from Chief Driesbach, and I apologize if I said those names incorrectly. As that seemed relevant to the subject matter. But at any event, especially when we had private ambulances available pre-merger, and then that seems to have become something that is relatively anemic at this point and does have a direct impact overall, and thus, again, creating a gap. So I broke it down in a more general aspect, and everything is in here as it relates to any data is referred to. There are no graphs or anything like that in there. What I'm referring them to is the presentations that we received here on the commission. So first one goes through total dispatches, and again, dispatched to USD and then dispatched outside of USD, rather than go to it through every specific district. Then I related it to Metro EMS dispatches and non-Metro EMS dispatches. And then what those percentages are to one another, denoting as Dr. Coombs and his team pointed out that 78% of all units dispatch arrive at the incident, only 50% of all dispatch units transport a patient. And then we're dealing with arrivals because there is duplication of efforts. Sometimes there's more than one unit that will be dispatched to a specific incident, and then breaking that down into transports. And I did break that data down in terms of by EMS and non-Metro EMS, in terms of what the percentage is as it relates to transporting it from the original dispatch, and then in terms of what the actual units arriving. Because arrives means they arrived on the scene. Next is public transportation. That is defined as a gap, not specifically because of volume or in terms of the amount of people that are travel. TARC is more of a focus as it relates to the significant increase that has been spent on the budget since merger, adjusted for inflation, and then the decrease in ridership and the decrease in total buses on the road. So costs have gone up, there have been fewer people getting on the bus, and there are fewer buses on the road. So that's just specifically a gap. And then the next one is the Urban Service District Fund deficit, or that is a gap, because there was an allocation of the taxes that went in specifically to provide the three services that are not available outside of the Urban Service District, which are streetlights, streetlights, garbage, and fire, those three. So, and again, that was referenced on the July 26th presentation, Local Government Revenues in Jefferson County, an overview. And that deficit is shown over the last 4 fiscal years to be $30,465,379 that has been funded from the general fund. So, and then the final one is state road funding, and the purpose of that is specifically just to disclose how the state actually comes up with the allocation methods, because that is a gap as it relates to money that is paid out through the city, and then how that gets, or through Metro, and then how that gets reallocated back. So just so that comes out, I'm going under the assumption, which is not always a good thing, that many of the citizens of Louisville aren't probably aware of that. So that kind of concludes the report, once I finish it.
Got a
And then
couple,
get feedback from my other committee members if I need to change it.
got a couple questions for you. You're the chair of the committee, subcommittee,
Yes, sir.
and were you at every meeting?
Yes, sir, I was.
And do you believe this is the report of the committee?
I believe it is.
Thank you. Do you know, do we have any idea, maybe people in the audience could know, do we know the deficit for fiscal year 2023 of the Urban Services District, revenues over expenditures or expenditures over revenues? Do we know that? Okay, I understand that the mayor's office has that information. Do we know, can you find that out, Mary Ann? If you could, can you ask to see if they have that? Okay, and also, question I have is, there was a big jump last year to $14,204,026 is the deficit that had to be covered by the general fund. Do we know why that big jump was there from 4,500,006 the year before?
I can pull up the specific report. It'll take me just a minute. I've got it.
That's all right. We go on to other questions.
Jason, I know the answer.
Mr. Coombs, Dr. Coombs?
If you look at the table that we presented, you can see that the big jump in expenditure was with the fire piece, not the street lighting or the garbage.
That's right.
So, now why the fire expenditures went up so much, I don't know.
Thank you.
But that's what's driving the large jump in the deficit.
Did you say fire extinguishers?
The fire district, Louisville Fire Department.
While you're looking up that information about the
This
basis.
quote is correct. It was the fire district expense went up by, I mean, substantially. It was I believe $14 million year over, $10 million increase.
Okay. I have a question about how you're defining the deficit. Can you just be clear on what the committee's definition of a deficit?
Revenues minus expenses.
Revenues minus expenses?
Yes.
So you've measured it then by the revenue that comes into the general fund?
No,
Correct?
no, we could have Dr. Coombs put the report back up. There are specific revenues through insurance, property taxes that were allocated specifically to the USD to provide these three services that are not provided outside of the USD. So, for example, in my neighborhood, we don't have streetlights. I live in Norton Commons, so we have a homeowners association that takes care of garbage and takes care of streetlights. So they don't take care of streets. We have streetlights in Norton Commons. So,
I understand that. I should have been more
So-
precise in my question.
so I'm trying to. So through the analysis that Dr. Coombs did, it reflects through what came in through Metro government as it relates to those allocated dollars. And that is the city's determination of the dollars that come in that are supposed to be allocated to those three specific services. Then the expenses or the budget that was set up for those three specific services have exceeded those revenues that came in through the door, thus the deficit.
Right. So the deficit then is the difference between the revenue generated inside the USD
Correct.
versus the expenditures inside the USD for those services.
Correct.
Okay. And you say that the deficit was made up from the general fund, is that?
Correct.
Actually, my question to you was, what assets, what revenue are you counting in the general fund as you calculate that deficit?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. What revenues?
Yeah,
It's just coming
well,
from
the
the general,
14 million came from somewhere.
from the general fund.
Exactly, from the general fund. So my question then is, what are the dollars in the general fund that you're counting in order to calculate the $14 million deficit?
That's a loaded, I can't answer.
It's
that question.
occupational and property taxes in the whole county.
There you go.
Okay. Did you look at other revenue that came into the general fund?
No,
Is that because you're unaware that such revenue exists, or because you know it exists, but you chose to ignore it?
neither.
Maybe that's a question for Dr. Coombs.
I think that is.
Yes.
I still don't understand the question.
Yeah, I figured you might not, but
Can I,
I'm sure Paul does.
Dr. Sim, go ahead. I can.
Oh, we didn't make this data up. We got it from OMB. This is an annual report that they put together on the Urban Service District. And they gave us the line items of revenues and expenditures. And then at the bottom, there was an adjustment to make the two equal. And that's where you get in fiscal 2022, the $14.2 million. So where does it come from? It comes from all of the sources that Metro government gets from the whole county. So
Well, that's my question, Paul. If it's all the revenue that comes into the general fund, are you certain that you've got it all?
I'm still confused, Earl.
Okay, that's okay. Let's leave it at that for the moment.
Let me clarify. This is a really, really, really important point. The people who live inside USD are taxed an extra price, and that goes to three services. It goes to lights, it goes to garbage, and it goes to fire, right? They brought in that extra tax in 2023, 82 million and change, correct? Thank you. And for those three services that are only provided inside the USD, it is illegal to provide those services outside the USD. The expenditures were $96 million. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. So to make that up, that delta, they had to dip into the general fund, which is paid into, we can argue over the percentages, but I think our data shows about 80%. But they had to dip into a fund that is not designed to pay for those three services to $14 million last year. Is that correct?
That's what it looks like to me.
Thank you.
Okay, and again, I'm not quarreling with the facts are the facts, and the facts we'll make sure the facts are all on the record. My question only has to do with the notion of what we're defining as a deficit, because the deficit has certain implications. It indicates that there's a shortfall that is somehow inappropriate, and that's the issue that I think we have to deal with.
Can I ask a question to Chairman Jones? Do you treat or do you look at the USD as any different than a suburban city?
I'm sorry?
Do you look at the USD any different than a suburban city?
I'm not sure I can answer that question.
Because
And I say that only because I'm not sure what the full authority of the USD are and whether they're identical to suburban city or not. And Louisville, USD used to be a city of first class. Whether or not that's the case for the suburban cities, I have no idea. Again,
the USD is the old city boundary.
yes.
One could conclude that is technically a city, even though it's been merged with the other unincorporated area, so it could be considered as a suburban city. From a concept standpoint. So taking that into consideration, and comparing that to the suburban cities, what are the revenue generating items that come into both of those entities, both of those elements? Then you have to look at the expenses that goes out to those as well.
We don't have a quarrel about what your data represents. There's no quarrel about that. The issue is whether or not you've counted all of the appropriate revenue that the USD generates. That's the question.
Okay, so
Okay, so, and back to your point, that the USD is either, should be seen as, or is analogous to a city. Keep that in mind as these discussions go forward. Okay, I think we can move on. Do you have anything else from the?
I have a quick question for you.
Oh, yes.
When you said, and this is just, can we all talk into our microphones? I have a really hard time hearing everybody. But the question is to you, Earl, which is, have we accounted for all the revenues from the Urban Services District, is what your question was?
That's correct.
Do you have any indication based upon the numbers that we are not including all of the revenue from the Urban Services District? I'm trying to understand the basis for your question.
No, that's fair. Yes, that is my understanding. I've been advised that that is the case.
Okay, can you expound upon that?
Well, I think some of the witnesses will deal with that today.
Okay.
But I do understand that this information was communicated to the committee.
This information was communicated to the entire commission, not just the committee. So this was a commission report that was done about a month ago, or a month and a half ago, give or take. It was on the 26th. So this has been shared, and the phrase that was used, let me finish, on that report was deficit. This was taken directly off of the report that was supplied to the commission. The other thing that I would come back and say is that it's difficult to account, and we did account, Dr. Coombs and his team has accounted for actual revenue generation within the USD and outside of the USD. That has also been done. But the purpose of those funds, thus the creation of the general fund, is that for the rest of the services that are not specifically dedicated to those three items go into a pool or a general fund that is to be distributed amongst the county, the entire creation and boundaries of Louisville Metro government. So there was no purpose for me to go through and dissect all of that information, because these are pooled dollars for services for all of the citizens of Louisville Metro government. And there are a few exceptions, because there are a few carve-outs for the small cities. There are also a few things for the small cities, like roads. Roads, they get their own allocation of road dollars from Frankfurt.
From Frankfurt.
It's from the state. So, and that's based on a per capita basis. So again, that goes into the equation of what's done. So there are a few exceptions.
Yes, Scott, we don't have a difference of opinion on the facts as you're reciting them. We just don't. Take my word for it. I accept everything you've said, and that you're probably going to say on the question of where revenue comes from, as you all have included in your report, and as Dr. Coombs himself has provided to the commission. That's not in dispute. The question, though, that I think is on the table, and that I was referring to, is revenue that the city itself has contributed to the general fund that more than covers the deficit, in quotes, that Dr. Coombs has identified. So it is indeed a deficit as defined. And the question then becomes, is it a deficit that is a meaningful deficit?
The way I see it,
Can I recognize Ms. Butler?
Yeah, we need to flesh this out now.
I have one suggestion why it may have jumped so high. I think there may be ARPA funds in here because this was the year in which they did first responder bump up pays. And that may be what jumped it up from 4.5 to 14 million. Because you, Jody, you might be able to say about, because I know Metro Safe, all of the 911 operators got it, all the firefighters got it, and the EMS people got big bumps, bonuses, if you will, COVID payouts.
You can
So we
answer.
need to find out from OMB if that is what made this jump, if it's ARPA funding and not necessarily other general funds.
Yes, ma'am. Jody Myman, Executive Director for Louisville Metro Emergency Services. And I can't answer if that's where that money's coming from, but all the first responders that worked through COVID did get a $5,000 bonus through 2021, I believe it was.
That wouldn't explain the big jump in 2023 then.
Mr. Chairman,
There's a type.
suburban city,
22.
suburban fire districts did not get money unless all of the cities got together and gave them premium pay from our own ARPA money. So any money that went to suburban fire districts was raised from all of the cities through their own ARPA money into a fund to give to them. And then I think that Louisville Metro may have matched 4 million or 2 million to that as well for suburban fire.
Okay, so are we saying then that the 14 million indeed for 2022 is less than that? That is to say, less of that came from the general fund? Is
It-
that,
It could be. I will.
well, I
look
think
at-
we need to, we either need to determine that that's the case or we need to drop that.
ARPA funds would have went into the general fund, not USD fund. Either way, it's from the general fund.
And I will say it was two stipends. One of them was in December maybe of 21, and one of them was, I think, in June of 22.
Thank you. That could be the explanation, in which case it went from 8 to 3 to 4, then to 14. So still millions of dollars of subsidies from become the general fund.
Okay. I think, anything else, Scott?
No, sir, I'm just asking, I'm answering your questions.
No, yes, you have. Thank you. Okay, is the tax committee ready to describe its or discuss its report?
Yes, thank you. There is, the report, after meeting a couple times, is broken down, as I mentioned the last time we met, into a couple of areas. One is about the population shift. Two, looking at tax and revenue. Then it gets into fire and EMS, and then ends up with TARP. And so that's how we sort of we review this and such. And I'll just go through the highlights, basically.
And Ken, we seem to have two reports. I don't know which one we're looking at. Which one are we looking at?
Which one do you have? What do you have?
One of them says August 18th, one of them says August 25th.
He's looking at the one without edits.
Okay.
My understanding, there was two. One was submitted by Mary Ann Butler, and the other one was submitted by.
Are you the chairman of that subcommittee?
Sorry?
Are you the chairman of the subcommittee? Did you go to all the meetings?
Did I call? Yes.
Okay. Is this the report of the committee?
One I submitted on the 25th.
Thank you. And this represents the support of
There'll
the,
be some differences on the committee because they wanted to, there's some inclusions they want to include. I made a point to that. They can be referenced into the database in terms of charts and data and projects and so forth.
when you're saying they want to include, you're talking about Ms. Butler?
Yes, and I don't want to, I think Ms. Fowler might agree with that. I don't know.
Did they come to
That's her
any
decision.
meetings of the commission, of the subcommittee? Did they come to the meetings in the subcommittee?
Sometimes,
What does that mean sometimes?
sometimes.
One?
You have to ask them of their attendance because we had a couple of meetings that they didn't attend.
Okay, thank you.
Was there a vote taken on this report?
I submitted it to the individuals, and Ms. Butler and Ms. Fowler sent back to me that Ms. Fowler agreed with Ms. Butler on her information, and the rest committee, which is three of us, agree with my report.
Okay. Thank you.
So basically, as I
Sorry,
mentioned,
Ken. So that's the one that's dated, which date?
the one at the 25th, I
It's-
think you received two, and that was probably an error that I got double clicked or something like that.
But it's the one that's dated the 25th or the 18th?
25th, yes.
Okay, thanks.
And the one, just to clarify, it should have several charts that were added to it based on requests from Ms. Butler.
I think we're
I
gonna
have
let him do
to-
his
have to
report
give the
first.
report first. So basically, when you look at the first section in terms of population shift, you can see how the urban services district declined to around 10,000, around 4%. Suburban cities went up slightly to around 7%, and unincorporated areas went up significantly, around 90,000. That equates to around 30% in terms of population shift. That's now basically we put that in there just to show how things are shifting within the county. And I thought it'd be pretty good to do that. I used to own aerial survey and mapping company, and over the past, probably the past 100 years, we've got images that house the population has shifted out in the county. So it's very, I think it's important to note that. On the second item is tax and sort of a revenue distribution. It's broken out into several areas. I know there's one thing in regards to the capital and expenditures, around $2.5 million, 6% were used by general funds. I do want to put a footnote, Ms. Butler pointed this out, that this could be public and private partnerships. She also want to have some, and so as others want to have a list of that. We can have those lists, but I would like to have that basically referred on the website in terms of those lists. I know Dr. Coombs and Ms. Carr have gone back and forth. I don't know all the detail of the conversation, but I know there's some, I guess, clarification in terms of what those projects are and so forth. And so we can address that or include that, how the committee would like to see that. So I just want to point that out to you.
So are you saying that you are planning, as those issues are resolved, to amend this report?
Sure, we can put some additional information there that in terms of what these projects are, and then, make a reference to any other projects that be coming up. But I would suggest maybe putting some examples in here, because I hate to see this come into a 10 or 20-page report.
Understood.
On the next item, it's basically outlines that nearly 80% of all taxes of the metro government is generated by residents and businesses in suburban cities, unincorporated county, and commuters from outside of the county. So just wanted to let y'all know in terms of where those tax monies are coming from based on residents within the county, or even, like I said, outside of the county. When you look at residents and businesses within the urban services district, they contribute about 21% of the tax revenues to the metro government. The next item is property taxes. There's 83 suburban cities. It's really a broad spectrum of the taxes that suburban cities assess their residents. And as explained a little bit ago, as well as in previous meetings, those taxes are applied to streets, sanitation. Some are for landscaping, some are for police, but very, very few number of suburban cities have police, but they do use those tax revenues to help pay for that. And then obviously when it comes to roads and so forth. So so there's, like I said, the point is, there's a broad spectrum of rates that are charged or levied to residents within the suburban cities. If you, in those suburban cities, do not directly levy a fire tax that comes from a suburban fire district, like where I live. You have St. Matthews and Anchorage and Middletown. They levy anywhere from 16 to maybe 20% on top of, or I should say, 0.16 and 0.20 on top of that assessment that the suburban cities assess their residents and so forth. So we got to look at those in I guess in a broad spectrum in terms of trying to include everything. There's a chart later on in the report sort of outlines in terms of looking things in totality with that. There was one thing I want to point out. When you look at occupational taxes paid by the place of residence, it's, I'd say, basically remained relatively flat across the board when it comes to the unincorporated area, outside of county, and the urban services district, as well as the suburban cities. Another item, I think we've already talked about that. I won't cover that in terms of the USD, in terms of how they assess the property tax and what it's being paid for. So I won't go over that since we discussed that just a few minutes ago. In looking at suburban cities, for the most part, what I know of being a past mayor and a commissioner of small cities, and talking to the folks that I know, they're all basically self-sustaining. They provide maintenance to the road, sanitation, street lighting, landscape, and other services. As I mentioned before, there are several cities that basically have a police department, which they will provide that. Those suburban cities who do not offer a police department, they usually contract that out either with LMPD, contractual services, or some other resources. One thing I do want to point out in the next item is, and I mentioned last time, if you're in an unincorporated area, but there are some of these entities within a incorporated area, like the USD, there are over 600 homeowner associations. Some of these associations might charge extra for landscaping or I don't want to say cosmetic, but basically entrances to, sorry, entrances into their city, and so, or to their homeowner association. But vast majority of these homeowner associations are located in the urban services district, and given that they do not receive some certain level of services from Metro government, they go through and assess anywhere from, I think, $200 to $1,200 in order to help pay for items and so forth. And that can be a broad spectrum of things, from garbage collection, recycling, street lighting, security, landscaping, and those sorts of things. So that has to be recognized in regards to those services that some residents are not receiving, but yet they're paying for those items because they're not receiving it. When it comes to fire.
Moment, Ken, when you say that they're not receiving, was it the committee's conclusion or view that there were services that they should be receiving from Metro? I'm just trying to
Yes,
understand the difference between what
they
they should
should.
be receiving.
Yes, they should receive it.
Okay.
Example, what? go ahead.
And those include which? You mentioned garbage, for example. Is
Garbage,
the
yes.
committee's conclusion that people outside the USD should receive Metro garbage collection?
They should receive, they should receive some garbage collection, but yet they don't receive it, so they have to pay for it extra.
I guess my question is, you're saying that should be part of, that they should receive it, even though, as far as I understood, unless I'm mistaken, that was not something which was to be funded by Metro. Is that correct or not?
Well, I mean, they could fund that, but you'll have to somehow, compensate for doing that on the urban services district. So if you look at the urban services district, they're paying a fee or tax in order to get those services, but other urban services district, they are not paying for that. They have to pay for themselves outside of that arena. Is that
Okay, I thought that the purpose of the chart, which is on page 5 of this report is to show that there is equality of taxation or payments for services between the USD and the and the suburban cities and the unincorporated areas. And indeed, to the extent that anybody is overtaxed, if you want to use the term,
The
it would
chart,
be many of those in the outside the urban services district. So I guess I'm trying to understand, are you suggesting that the funds that the suburban cities and the people in the unincorporated areas who pay for HOAs, that they should pay additional tax instead of paying for, let's say, private services, they should be taxed by Metro for those services?
there's options that these individuals can take. Option one is that they pay for themselves.
Yes.
Option two, if they want to work with the urban services district who provides the services, they can probably try to do that as well. Become a logistically challenge to doing that.
Yes.
Your chart, Chairman, your chart you're looking at, that's just strictly a comparison of what their rates are. That's all it is. That's
No, I understand. I'm just trying to understand. You said that the people in the areas outside the USD are paying for services that they don't get. And my only question was whether or not your position is that they should get those services from Metro. And I'm pointing out, if my understanding is correct, that some of those services are ones that they do not pay for. And are you suggesting that they should pay additional for those services?
I'm not suggesting they should pay additional not, but I think there should be consideration on trying to address how to provide those services.
I don't,
Okay.
I don't understand. I don't understand the question. I think Earl just asked, are there things that they're getting they're not paying for? The answer to that is an emphatic no.
Oh,
There are things that we are.
with that, they've got to pay for.
Let me finish real quickly. And the answer to the question is, are they paying for things in addition because Louisville's not providing them? The answer to that is an emphatic yes. We look at EMS, we look at police, we look at TARC. There's a lot of things that people in the suburbs paying for that they do not get services. So then they have to pay extra for Middletown Police, Anchorage Police, J-Town Police, Linden Police, Shapley Police. We have to pay for EMS all over the county, even though EMS is supposed to provide services all over the county. So the answer is, are we paying for what we're not getting? The answer is emphatically yes, and there's no other way to put it.
Well, I have no disagreement with that at all. The record is very clear on that point. And the only reason I ask the question is when you make a broad statement about things that they pay for that they should get. I just wanted to understand which services were you talking about. And to the co-chair's point, EMS and fire and police would certainly be in those. Garbage would not be. So I was just trying to understand whether or not you were being all encompassing or whether you were limiting your statement just to the services that the record so far indicates all county residents are paying for. And that would be police and EMS. Okay, thanks.
Let's see, where did we leave off? Oh, we left off on fire. So there's 4 districts. Well, if you look at fire, you got like 5 fire districts that are outside the urban services district. Within that, there's 4. I'm sorry, 7. I said 5. I don't know. You're correct. It's in fact, I missed right. That's 7. Sorry about that. And then you have within the urban services district, there's 4 districts within those boundaries and so forth. Other than that, we really didn't have any other additions or comments other than that. When it comes to EMS, I know we've talked about that extensively on several occasions. In regards to the EMS and the services and so forth, Dr. Coombs went through a pretty good analysis in terms of the originating, where the originating response would come from, and where they will go in terms of various areas of the county. And then you have a third element, it's called transport of services. And that's where they actually get paid in order to compensate them, their efforts to going through that process in terms of transporting the patient to the hospital or wherever the case may be. Let's see. There are several fire districts that are deployed to the urban services district, like St. Matthews. But also there are a significant number, when I say significant, definitely not a majority, that they said basically they respond to other districts out in the county and so forth. The Louisville Fire Department, they'd respond, I believe, to Shively and to Fairdale in order to provide those services to them. And let's see, I think I can go over the statistics with all this, but it's sort of that graph sort of gives you a rough idea of how things are broken out and so forth. I think there is some thought that we need to go through and look at how all the arrangements between the fire districts do work and how each of the fire districts do work together in terms of collaborating and working together in order to provide services to patients and so forth. And I'm really particularly talking about EMS and not so much as fire. So that's EMS is always it's a challenge in order to provide those services, particularly when it comes to compensation, and that probably has to go on a state level in terms of trying to look at the reimbursement rates of that. Next item is roads. Basically got into two categories. You got paving, and then you have new roads or improvement of the roads, not so much of paving and so forth. When it comes to the well, I know one conclusion we all agree with, that Jefferson County is basically shortchanged when it comes to allocating road funds to our county. There's a formula called the formula of the fifths, and I sort of outlined that in one of the bullet points. I won't go over that, but basically looks at rural areas as well as the population and so forth. So that definitely needs to be addressed. And I think my colleagues who serve in the state level, we know it's going to be a challenge to try to make that change because, gosh, back from 10, 11, or 12 years ago, I and a couple other people try to get a resolution or put a resolution together, try to make that change on the state level in terms of changing the formulas of the fifth. So that definitely needs to be addressed and taken care of. It appears that when it comes to the pavings, the paving goes through, as I think is discussed before, a grading system in terms of allocating where the needs are and so forth. Suburban cities don't go through that, they don't have a grading system. They accumulate funds for 2, 3, or 5 years and then basically go and do some type of paving in order to accommodate any wear and tear of the roads and so forth. Then you have, like more of a capital type, and I'll use the word capital loosely, more of a capital type of instruction. There has been improvements out in the county. Those mainly more for interstates and some of those roads that are feed up to the interstates. But there's not a whole lot of capital that goes into those state roads that are really like more secondary and tertiary types of feeder systems into that. And the last item is TARC. I think we talked about that as before. The taxes have gone up almost a little more than, actually more than double over the past couple of years in doing that, while ridership has declined. So that's basically sort of concludes the report from Tax Committee.
Are there anybody have any questions for, or any comments regarding the report?
I have, under TARC, the GAPS committee and this committee should reflect one another. In that it went up 38% when you take in today's dollars instead of 119. So that the GAPS committee and this are both the same. And if,
And just so you'll see it, she's referring to it's the second to last page on the GAPS committee report, where it talks about it's 38% when you control for inflation. So let's make sure that statement is.
Sure, be glad to. Thanks for pointing that out.
and they need to, I also think we definitely need to put in under population shift, the chart that has the population density. I think that tells a big story as well, which is in, we got it from Dr. Coombs, and it's it's right under population in the one with edits.
I think that's a good addition.
Sure, I'll put that in there.
And I just had one other question for the tax committee. And it's actually kind of relevant for both committees, but the observations about where revenue is earned, I think the report said 79% is earned outside the urban services district, if I recall correctly. How does the committee account for, or does it consider to be relevant that businesses outside the urban services district, some of them, many of them, I don't know the number, maybe that's something that could be checked, exist there because of their proximity to the urban services district?
So say your question again. What's the relevance of?
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is,
earn revenue in terms of their proximity to USD. So you have, gosh, what was the number is,
Actually, I think if we could reword it, is the business located there because of its proximity to something else? Like companies are located here because they are supplier to Ford or supplier to GE. So they're located here.
And I think both Fords are outside USD.
Whether they're inside or outside, what I'm getting at is they have suppliers who choose to locate somewhere to be close to whoever it is they're supporting. And I don't.
what I really had in mind in asking the question, satellite operations that have occurred, that have been established by companies inside the USD, but they've established satellites outside the USD. So those satellite operations wouldn't be there, but for the fact, one might argue, this is the question, one might argue that they wouldn't be there, but for the fact that their headquarters or their principal place of business was in the urban services district. You might look, for example, at Churchill Downs, which has a significant office presence on Hurstman Parkway, as an example.
when you say satellite,
Yes.
I mean, Churchill Downs, I can understand that, so that's sort of a branch, but how prominent is that in terms of having a Ford or having a Churchill Downs that has a subsidiary or has a satellite, as you say, that's out in the suburban area that might be in the urban services district?
Well, I think it's something that should be considered. I don't know the answer. I mean, one can think of bank.
Considered how?
Sorry?
My question to you is considered how? What's the relevance? Because they're still in Louisville.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter. I mean, I think that people make business decisions because of land or rent or all these different things. They don't make a business decision based upon, I'm located in the urban services district, so therefore I have to have my satellite office in the urban services district. It's much more involved than just what you're I think what your premise is.
Well, it's much more involved than, let's say, jurisdictional lines of,
Right, but how do you account for what you're stating?
well, I guess the point essentially is that if you strip this down, Louisville is potentially, possibly, I guess this is a question that the committee might want to consider, not much different than any other metropolitan area where there is a center and institutions, businesses, people tend to orient themselves around the center. And so the question is would those, let's call them ring locations, businesses, residences, would they exist but for the fact that they were in proximity to the center? And since the answer is contradict, you cannot contradict the fact that they would not, then I think that the committee might want to consider whether or not or how the revenue that is being earned by the residents who live in those areas of the county actually are there and benefit because they're near the USD. And that therefore, when we get to the question of saying, how do we then allocate resources between the two areas or the 3 or the 86 areas, 83, whatever the number is? That's a factor that I think the committee needs to consider. The data are what we've seen. Dr. Coons has produced the data. The committee might want to consider what the implications of those data are and how they are relevant for determining the future of this community, given our structure.
Are you suggesting, I have one more follow-up. Are you suggesting that we abolish our employment centers like Forest Green, like East Point, like J-Town Industrial Park? Are you suggesting that we take our employment centers that are within the county and we abolish that because they're county and not located in the urban services district?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. All I'm saying, Senator, is that those places located there likely would not be there, but for the fact that they're near the city of Louisville, near downtown. That's all.
Senator Nemos has a,
Mr. Chairman, I think you were right in the past. They were here because of Louisville was downtown Louisville. But I think we've moved on to the future, and I think the data shows that people are moving out and businesses and that into the outside of the county, outside the urban service district. So them coming here is not necessarily because of the inner service district in Louisville. They're moving here for the whole of Jefferson County, and they're actually moving outside the urban service district and not supplying necessarily to businesses in the urban service district. And all cities are having this problem, especially with the work at home and like Humana and people that have either moved out or they're working from home and they're working outside the urban service districts. And even the plants like Ford and that are not in the urban service districts now. So I think what you're saying is true of the past. It's a little bit antiquated. So that's my comment.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Senator No.
Yeah, I just want, I find this a fascinating exchange, discussion, and I think the request is to consider this as to how that might, and I had never thought of it, quite frankly, from that perspective, but it certainly piques my interest in understanding those dynamics, so I think it's a reasonable inquiry.
Yeah.
I think it is too. I actually think that, I think it is. But I think it has to be understood that some are coming here because of J-Town, which is, I think, one of the biggest cities in the state. Some are coming here because of Riverport. You know, we have a whole area of Valley Station because of Fort Knox, Valley Village. And so while I think it is a very important point, I think there are also people move here because of suburban areas, Oldham County, Shelby County, and Bullitt County as well. So I think that's, and I also want to note that what I hate is that when we're having this conversation, and I'm part of it, we shouldn't be having this conversation. Because when you were talking about, are we different than other metro areas? Yes. And the reason we're different is because I don't think another area, and this is a management question more than anything. I won't get into names. Thankfully, we have a new mayor that's moving forward, and I think he's doing the right things. I think his mind's in the right place. I think he's going to do good things. But the difference here is we pay for so much that we don't even get. That is immoral. And so if we didn't have that, if EMS actually came out to Worthington and saved our lives, we wouldn't have had to do these types of things. But because we've had to do them, we have to then show that we're floating the county and not getting the service. I wish we didn't have to have this conversation. And if we had proper management, we wouldn't, but we must and we will because of that.
And again, that is a very valid point. I think it is the one thing that has come loud and clear in the public hearings as well as in the discussions at the commission itself and in the data that's provided to the commission. And it's something that needs to be addressed. And I guess the only point I was trying to make is that the division that is either a product of or a cause of, but whatever it is something that the commission should note. And then as we look at the question of what's the consequence in terms of what we recommend to the legislature, I think we should want to get beyond that to say, stop it, figure out a way to make this better. But does it require dismantling? That's the question.
I just want to make the comment that, we're all human, but at least I thought we were here to explore these things and consider a range of possibilities and look at things that perhaps have not been looked at since the first effort of the so-called merger. And how does it manifest itself today? So I just caution that we not be conclusory as we take this journey. In fact, I fight hard to keep myself open to all sides of the discussion and information that I receive, and just be professional about it. So I'm open to inquiry, whether I feel uncomfortable or whether I feel comfortable about it. So I'm good. I like this line. I like the exchange. I got to tell you that too.
And I thank you, Gerald. And I want to note that I don't think anybody here has ever said anything different than what I'm about to say. And you and I have talked about it before. I want Miss Jones on Algonquin Parkway to be safe.
Yeah.
I also want Miss Jones on Shelbyville Road to be safe. And if it weren't for us having to add on extra services, she wasn't safe. And she's paying for it.
Yeah, and I think that's what this journey is. It's not to just deal with Miss Jones, it's to deal with a myriad of issues and dynamics. And I think if we stay rooted in that, I mean, we can all be anecdotal. We all can pull things out that can make an argument about one thing or the other. But when you try to pull all these dynamics together and come up with a fair, workable, just solution, that's when it gets difficult. So it's not, I think we're not trying to say us against them. If we get into that mode, we get a problem, I think. I think we got to figure out how do we get to everybody wins. I got my thoughts about it, but I just caution that. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Okay. It may be that we're concluded with the committee reports.
Mr. Chairman, may I speak?
Sure, please.
There's another committee
Yes.
that was established on February the 7th. And it was called Services. And I took that as a representative of the 80 cities that are in Jefferson County. Being a mayor, I realized that that committee should have been one of the most important. At our first two public meetings, one was held on Jefferson Boulevard and the other one on Muhammad Ali, it was a total of 9 folks in the audience. That was it. We go to the next one, Valley Station. There's about 65 people that are there. A storm came through, and it was so important for those folks in Valley Station to let this commission know that they weren't getting the services, that we sat there in the dark until almost 8:30 or 9 o'clock. We go to Atherton. same thing. Only then, the lady from, I believe it was Tyler Park, felt like everybody in the East End got something, but when we got to Eastern, everybody from Eastern felt like somebody else got something. But over and over again, the commissioners that came to these meetings, that took these meetings seriously, not just public meetings, but these commission meetings, since they were established by the legislature, should have heard one of two things: no services, taxes, money. I've been on this and I was appointed to this committee, and I felt honored, and I feel honored today that the representatives and senators were allowing Jefferson County League of City representative to be here. I'm very, very disappointed that some of the commissioners did not think it was important enough to show up. Now we have a committee called Services. We are now into August, almost September. This report will be written and given to the legislature without zero meetings from the Services Committee. Now, I can write my own report, but I even took the time on my vacation from California to attend that meeting 2 weeks ago. I got an email or a text last Wednesday. I'm still on vacation. Do I have any thoughts for the committee? I got a lot of thoughts for the committee, but we've never met. Then I get another text going, can you meet on Tuesday? Well, I just got home at midnight on Monday, so the answer is no. Well, I'll send you the notes that I've got. Where did you get the notes? I received nothing from anybody. So I just wanted to let you know my frustration of what I thought was probably the most important committee that each of you all heard from public entities saying lack of services, paying for services, not getting services. So I hope that when the report comes out from this commission, that somebody will ask somebody that's serving on the Services Commission to give some sort of idea. I was told one time, if you don't like the job, don't take it, because I was whining about something about being a mayor. You know what? I stood up and took it. 1 meeting per month. That's all it took. So I just wanted to express my frustration that the Service Committee, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Nemus, the chairman just left. I think Chief Driesbach is on here, and I have not seen the other member. So that's my thought from the Services Committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know something? Everybody's time is precious. And it doesn't always add up the same way for everyone. We all have varying degrees of responsibility and obligation. But I will not demean anyone takes their time and has concern for what we're trying to do here. I will not demean anyone, and I would again caution us not to go down that road. I find it offensive.
You're right, Senator Neal, and I'm
I think
sorry.
we should not do that.
I'm sorry for.
We need to get along. We need to deal with basic information. If something has not come together, deal with the chairs, and we can still have time to deal with that if we can do that. And I request that that be addressed. But we should not. We should not. Now, maybe that's my style. But I really don't want to take part in that. I see it all the time, and it's not necessary.
Okay, I think we can move along, and I think we have some witnesses, some people who've come to offer testimony. And I guess we'll hear first then from Mr. Myman.
Thank you, sir. Again, Jody Myman, I'm the Executive Director here for Louisville Metro Emergency Services. We really appreciate the opportunity to come in and speak on our behalf for Louisville Metro EMS and what we do and the things that go on. And also like to thank the commission too, because a couple weeks ago, you all had a lot of good things to say about our dispatchers, our 911 dispatchers, and we really appreciate that because they are the true first responders, and they do a lot of things for our public safety servants, and they should be considered first responders, but they're not. So I really appreciate the commission for acknowledging them a couple weeks ago. So just a little bit about me, real quick. I came from the fire service, spent 24 years in the fire service, came here as a deputy director of emergency services, and then was appointed as the director. So I'm about 30 years into public safety. Retired as a battalion chief with the City of Louisville Fire Department, and also spent 24 years retired as an assistant chief out at the old Lake Dreamland Fire Department on the southwest part of the county that's now been absorbed by the Pleasure Ridge Park Fire Department. Emergency Services is a very diverse agency. Not only do we have EMS, but we also have the 911 center that falls underneath us. We also do emergency management, so we're the lead coordinating agency for any disaster that goes on in Jefferson County. All 120 counties have an emergency manager. That's me. Also the deputy, Kelly Jones. He retired 30 years with the Louisville Metro Police Department. So we, like I said, we take care of any disaster or event that happens throughout all of Jefferson County, not just in the USD, but we take care of all that. The 911 deflection program, mental health deflection program, we just created that. That falls underneath us. Special events, which is any special event that's permitted through Jefferson County comes through our office, and then 311 comes through us as well. So just a little bit of history on EMS, at least over the past 8 years since I've been in this position. We did, I just mentioned a couple weeks ago that we had 24 trucks, and that is what we had. It was a bleeding system, no pun intended. We obviously needed help. We were losing very good people due to burnout. And our unit-hour utilization at that time was in the 90th percentile, which we want it to be below 50%, which is how busy your trucks are during a 12-hour or during your shift time. So obviously the certificate of needs from the suburban department started to come through, and we started discussing with each one of those agencies as they did do that. And one of the things that when we discussed that we wanted them to do was we all wanted to use the same protocols. There's no sense in people in Jefferson County getting different type of care. We want to do the best, and we want to have the same protocols, the same medical direction, which even though we do have different medical directors, they do get together and discuss those medical protocols and the policies that should go on. And then the biggest thing was if we dispatch you, we want you to go. Nobody in Jefferson County or anywhere, when you get called when you call 911, you don't care what's on the side of that truck, whether it's a fire truck, a police car, an ambulance. You're just glad that help's there, and you want them to go. So those were the things that we talked about. I know there was some discussion a couple weeks ago about mutual aid agreements, and it was decided by the city that we wouldn't have to enter into any mutual aid agreement because we're all except for the fire district of Jeffersontown, which has a different certificate of need. They're only for, you've heard this before, I apologize if you're hearing this again, but their certificate of need and license is only for the city and fire district of Jeffersontown. But the rest of them are throughout Jefferson County, either listed as Jefferson County or 95% of the population with a 30-minute response time from a certain location within their jurisdiction. So we're all responding for the most part within the same jurisdiction. We do relocate resources. I know there was some mention last week that we do that, and Mr. Chairman, just we did go into Anchorage Middletown 329 times in 2022. So that was 329 possible lives that were saved in that area. So we do go into the county. We spend a lot of time in Pleasure Ridge Park. We spend a lot of time in Okolona. We spend a lot of time in Fern Creek, the old Butyl neighborhood, because those areas are as busy sometimes as the USD is downtown. So if our supervisors see that there's a gap in Pleasure Ridge Park or any location, we will relocate an ambulance out into those areas for coverage, just to make sure that until their ambulances get back in service or get back into those areas, that there is coverage for those places. It was mentioned a couple weeks ago as well about Newburgh Road. We did move out there. It's a centralized location. It's very easy for our employees to get to. It's very easily accessible on the interstates for our ambulances to deploy. we're licensed for 60 trucks. Obviously, we don't have 60 ambulances on the street, but we do have 60 trucks that are available. So it was mentioned last week or a couple weeks ago that when one of our ambulances leaves the hospital and has to go out of service for shift, that they had to wait till they got back to Newburgh Road until they could go back into service, and that's not true. Our people go in service simultaneously because we've got that many trucks that they can do that. So we do have to get our people back sometimes because if they're on a 16-hour shift, due to our contractual obligations, we have to get them home and rest for 8 hours so that they can come back on and be on that shift again. So we do take them out of service. I'm sorry?
What are those contractual obligations you're talking about?
Through our collective bargaining agreement with the Teamsters. Yeah, sorry about that. And then we do have 60 ambulances, trucks. We don't staff those obviously all the time, but we do have 60 ambulances that we're licensed to use. So, we do a lot of special events as well. So we don't have to take ambulances off the street in order to do a lot of the special events that we operate, the Derby and some of the larger special events that we do staff.
So do I understand then that the goal is to have 25 available on a regular basis, but others are available should they be needed to supplement the 25, or am I missing something?
No, so our staffing that we're allotted for gives us 20 trucks. That's 20. So we do have the extra trucks that, like I said, we can use for special events, or we can, when an ambulance goes off track because of shift change, they don't have to wait till they get back to our division in order for another ambulance to use that same ambulance. They can simultaneously go in and out of service so that we're not missing any gaps.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question, Director?
Yes, absolutely.
Did you say 60 units you have?
60 trucks. They're not, like I said, they're not staffed. Our goal is to staff 20 trucks a day. We average about between 14 and 16 trucks.
Okay, I understand. So, but you have a total of 60. How
That's
is that broken up between the advanced and basic?
So that's just physical trucks. I apologize if I'm confusing there. That's just physical
This is
ambulances.
the first time I heard like, oh my God.
Yeah, so that's just physical ambulances that are sitting in our shop, ready to be used at any given time. So when an ambulance goes out of service for shift change from University of Louisville Hospital, there's already a crew at our division that's getting in another truck, one of those 60 that's available, and they can go in service as that crew's going out of service.
So basically it's a function of personnel.
Yes,
Which
and we are short-staffed.
I'm not surprised.
Yes, and we are, like I said, we are short-staffed. We do have several vacancies between EMTs and paramedics.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Do you have any plans to put more than 20 on the streets at any time?
We have an open recruiting policy with Metro, so we're always, our application process is always open. So we're always attracting EMTs and paramedics from all over the country. We're not just trying to attract them locally. And we do recruit classes back to back to back. We don't have to wait for approval through the budget year in order to do that. So we always have, as soon as we finish a recruit class, we've already got a list established, and we start another recruit class within that next month or two after that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And then I do have, just real quick, there was some discussion a couple weeks ago about the actual fire side of suburban fire and getting some data, and I did bring some of that with me if you'd like to hear some of that later with questions.
Mr. Ryan, first of all, I want to say thank you for your service, and thank you for your service, sir. The men and women who work for you are the finest in our county, and we want to thank you for that. And any question I have is not directed toward the high quality, the professionalism of the people who provide the services. So under you is fire and EMS and other things?
Just EMS, not fire is not under me.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So with the units that you have now, if the suburban EMS didn't exist, do you think you could adequately serve the needs of the county with appropriate response times?
That's really a tough question to answer because we've got so many EMTs and paramedics in the county now, they would have to go somewhere. So we had a lot of people leave us as a lot of these agencies started to come on board. There's no doubt about that the suburban ambulances have helped the system. It was a broken system. There's no doubt about it. And there's still a lot of issues with the response system that we've got. So like I said, if we had the number of EMTs and paramedics, if there was no suburban department.
With the number that you have today, could you add?
No.
And why don't you guys have any ambulances outside the Watterson other than the ones that they're stationed in Butchell? Why don't you have any in J-Town or Okolona?
Well, they're providing coverage, but like I said earlier, we will move our ambulances out into those areas if if there's a gap. We also do have a truck every day in Fairdale.
Okay. In Fairdale, which doesn't have their own EMS, right?
That's correct.
It's Fairdale and Shively outside the USD that does not have it?
Yes. Yes, we do park a truck at Shively as well.
So is it fair to say with the department that you have now, you couldn't, as the question I asked you a second, I want to make sure I got the answer as I understand it. And if I'm wrong, don't, correct me. But with the department that you have now, you could not adequately provide the services all across the county, EMS services all across the county, correct?
I've always said that.
Okay. We have, our numbers show that 83% of the runs that you guys, that Metro EMS provides are inside USD. Is there any reason to quibble with that?
I don't have your data or that specific, I know you got it from MetroSafe, but I don't have that in front of me, but I mean, that could be accurate.
If it's 83, maybe 85, maybe 81, but that's approximately your experience, correct?
We do, like I said, on the western side of the.
I'm sorry, it's 78%.
On the western side of the district, we're in the suburban areas a whole lot more than we are on the east side.
Yep. So the reason, just so people who are listening, the reason the difference between 83 and 78 was the 83% included Fairdale and Shively. So it's 78% inside USD. And so my question just comes down to fundamentally fair. Do you think that it's fair that someone who lives in Fisherville or Valley Station pays the same taxes as everybody else in the community, but your trucks don't ever go on, but they don't get the same services? I'm just talking about EMS services. Is that fair to that taxpayer?
I mean, I believe it is because, think about this, say you're that Fisherville taxpayer, but you have an accident in front of the airport, but that's the closest ambulance that's going to come and get you.
Does the person who lives in USD pay the Middletown, Anchorage EMS tax?
No, they do not.
Who provides their services if they get hurt at the mall?
It could be anybody. It could be it's the closest ambulance.
But mostly it's going to be St. Matthews or Anchorage, right?
It could be.
So
if they're in
So
service.
it's your testimony that you think it's fair that somebody who lives in Fisherville pays full Louisville EMS taxes.
See, I don't know.
But doesn't get, hold on, let me finish, but doesn't ever get a Louisville EMS run out there. That's fair to you?
That could not be true. That may not be true. They may get an EMS run out there from Louisville Metro.
But only 30%, 22% at most go outside the USD.
But it could be that Fisherville run.
2/3 of our population live outside the USD, but only 1/5 of the runs go outside the USD. And you think that's fair?
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, actually, I think it's unfair to ask him to give his personal opinion on what's fair or not. That's what this commission is to do, is to take all the data in it and see what is. But what I did hear you say is that, or you alluded to, you didn't actually say it, if you had all the resources and the money to run all of the trucks that the other services are running, then you could provide the services for that. You just don't have that well, you might have it in the trucks with 60, but you don't have that with the EMTs and that, and you're unable to service the whole outside urban service districts with what you have.
It's all about, you're correct, it's all about people.
People and the money to bring the people in and that.
That's correct.
Now, what the Chairman Nemus is talking about is something that I say you shouldn't have to answer, is that because you aren't able to provide the services out in the outside the urban service districts as you would like to, then they have to subsidize in those particular areas, with the exception of the South End, Fairdale, and Okolona that don't have those. So that's what he's saying, is they're paying for services that you, if able to, would provide. They're paying for someone else to provide it.
So, and my
You don't
question.
have to answer that. I was just.
No, I just had a question too, back to Mr. Chairman. Is how much of a person's property tax from the suburban area truly goes to EMS?
6 cents out of every $100 of mine goes to EMS.
Okay.
10 cents out of every $100 from J-Town. I think it's 4 cents out of every $100 from St. Matthews. We've got that information. So it's a lot. And we pay the same amount percentage-wise as the people that live in USD, but we don't get those services. So we're paying for their services that we don't get. we're paying extra for our services. And then third, and this is the most offensive of all, then only the ones that we pay for, especially, it's an especially pernicious problem with St. Matthews. 60% of their runs go into USD and they don't get paid for that. So their taxpayers are paying for services they're not getting, paying additional for services to cover because they're not getting the ones they're already paying for. And then the ones that they're paying for secondarily are subsidizing you guys again, and they're not getting reimbursed for that,
But all those responses are within their licensed area.
but not their taxpayer area. It's that's a cute response, but the taxpayers aren't paying for it. And I don't mean to be that, it's a response that a lot of people give. It is in their jurisdiction, but it's not being paid for.
That's right, but you can't confuse geography with need. If I need an ambulance, no matter where I'm at, I want the closest ambulance to come.
And no one here is talking about saying that the closest box couldn't do it. You don't have fire, but until 6 years ago, Louisville Fire didn't respond outside their district. And there was an incident in St. Matthews and everybody remembers that. And thankfully, the guys that run fire, the guys and gals that run fire got together and they figured it out. And you guys, thankfully, and this is to your credit and your predecessors' credit, you guys had this agreement with all these suburban fires that, look, guys, we'll figure the money out on the back end. But when somebody needs it, we're going to get the closest ambulance there. And nobody here is talking about changing that at all. What we're talking about doing is or at least I'm talking about doing, is I'm saying it is fundamentally unfair and must stop that we pay for services that we don't get, and then we pay again, and then we subsidize USD a third time. That's what I'm talking about. So don't confuse this with the closest box. We all support the closest box going to the individual in need. And that largely is because of what you guys have required when the suburban EMS went to get their CON. So I want to thank you for that.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
Remind me again, please, how long have you been in the current position?
Almost 8 years.
And how long have you been in the department?
Almost 8 years.
Same thing. Let's say over the last 8 years, how would you describe the changes, if you will, in terms of the kind of runs, the nature of the runs, the location of the runs? What's changed over that period of time as you look back?
Well, and I think, Chief Driesbach, who's on, he said it a couple of weeks ago in one of y'all's previous meetings. We've taught people how to call 911 for years, and they're doing it. And they're calling 911 for, everything. The problem is we have to treat everybody's emergency as their emergency because it truly is an emergency for them. So, just going back to my days, as a young firefighter back in the 90s, it took somebody to go to a payphone or to go into somebody's house to call 911. Now everyone has a cell phone. So 87% of our 911 calls are coming from wireless phones. We may get 10 calls on someone sleeping on a park bench because they look like they may be unconscious. So, that's the biggest difference in the responses over, not only the last 8 years, but the last 30 years.
I see. And to what extent, for example, does that, if it does, affect your ability to serve, let's say, your current service area, as well as to go beyond it?
Our current service area is Jefferson County.
Okay.
So we go wherever we're dispatched to.
Okay, thanks. You mentioned something about, did I understand you to say you're responsible for a certain disaster response?
Yeah, so that's on the emergency management side. So we're the lead coordinating agency when it comes to a storm, any large chemical incident, large fire. We're the lead coordinating agency for incidents like that.
When you say coordinating agency, as opposed to which other agencies?
So we're not necessarily in charge. We bring everybody together. So if we have to establish a unified command between agencies on these large events, the East Palestine, Ohio train derailment, God forbid something like that happened here over the years, the Applegate issue that we're having out in Highview. Like I said, we're part of the unified command and that lead coordinating agency on site.
And the commands that you are unifying are which?
We're unified command in situations like that where we bring key players from all different agencies.
Which ones?
It depends on the incident. It could be the health department, the fire department, the police department, ourselves, EMS. It just depends on the key players that are put in a row, the federal, the feds, the state, our state responders that come in. So it just depends on the situation.
I see. Okay. Have there been numbers of those things in recent years, which have required you all to?
Unfortunately, yes.
For example, which ones might we be familiar with?
Well, obviously COVID, the protests, all the weather emergencies we've had over the last several years, the Applegate lane incident in Highview that we're working through currently now. You never know what the day is going to bring.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? Mr. Muhammad,
Mary?
at one time, I understand that dispatchers are the ones that decide maybe the guy's got a broken leg or they're having a heart attack or something like that. So I understand at one time we had a different type of ambulance service. I'm going to use the word Commonwealth, maybe like that. And I understand that maybe hospitals may absorb that. My question is, in order to alleviate some of these, the guy looks like he's fallen over and I don't know if he's drugged out or a broken leg or somebody going to the doctor. How come we have not encouraged nor brought back in or even used the TARC 3? Why have we not brought those things up and given those certificate of needs back to some of those companies to take care of these smaller problems?
So, it was mentioned a couple of weeks ago, there used to be an overabundance of private ambulance services through the years that have just gone away, and there's very few now, probably 3 or 4 now that's in the county. So they're having to absorb all of those incidents. One of the things that we're working on doing now is what we call a nurse triage program, where we'll actually have nurses sitting in the 911 center that if there's a non-emergency call, it'll be able to be diverted over to that nurse sitting there instead of sending an ambulance. So it'll keep a lot of our ambulances potentially on track for more emergent type of issues. And that program is going to be starting within this fiscal year. We've already purchased the technology, and we're working with all the suburban departments as well as Metro EMS to figure out, who those practitioners are going to be out in the field that potentially if the nurse sees that they do need some type of response, it could just be someone in a car in a non-emergency type of pace to get, take care of that. We also have a line item in our budget that we can send a cab to take someone, maybe they need medication refilled, they need to get to a doctor's appointment, and they don't need an ambulance. And we utilize that yearly as well.
Who absorbs the liability on that, though? I mean, I get the cab or something like that, but to send a nurse in a car,
Yeah, we absorb that.
is that nurse going to take that person to the hospital if they have a broken leg? Who sends that liability?
No, if they truly do need an ambulance, then once they get there and triage it further, they will call one of the street ambulances to come and take care of that. But they're part of Metro EMS, so we accept that liability as well.
So your opinion, I'm just trying to figure out every single way, this is what this commission does, is to try to get it better, working together. In your opinion, is there a place for a private ambulance service?
Well, there's always a place, we can't do interfacility transfers unless they're an emergency type of situation. So there's always the need, for more private ambulance services throughout the community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question if you all don't. Oh, Marion.
Miriam was first.
I actually have questions for Councilman Arthur because he had to leave. In the last meeting, we learned suburban EMS can come to the urban service district and on their way out, end up in another urban service district run. But that only happens if they come back into service. This concerned me because if EMS is supposed to be responding to calls, but they're out of service, someone can die. Do you have data that shows how often EMS is out of service?
We do, and there is agencies, some a lot more than others, that do go out of service. We call it ghosting ambulances, and our dispatchers can actually see that they're doing that. And what's bad about that is when our dispatchers dispatch a unit to a certain fire district, and they're coming from outside that fire district. If there's ghosted ambulances within that fire district, they may hear the run, they may not, they may pick it up, but it also takes them a couple more minutes to turn around and redispatch that. So, if you're in a cardiac arrest situation, you've only got 10 minutes, and you could be talking about a minute and a half to get the call to the ambulance, and then another minute and a half to 2 minutes to redispatch that for one of these ambulances that may be out of service. So we do have data on that. In the 3 months let's see, it was May, June, and July, suburban EMS was out of service over 10,000 hours.
Okay.
And that's, I mentioned the problem, the problem earlier, and there's a lot of chiefs out there that are trying to fix this. We really are. We've gotten together. We've had, we're feeding them the data, and I truly believe that a lot of chiefs didn't know that their people were going out of service. They leave a hospital and they go out of service, and they were literally passing runs. Our dispatchers could see that they were passing runs, and they would ask certain ambulance agencies if they would make this run, and they would deny it and remain out of service. They just would. And, it's very disheartening for me to see that, because that's what you signed up to do. But like I said, there is a lot of chiefs out there that have really started going after their people and making sure that their people are in service.
Thank you. I don't know what kind of follow-up he would want, but he'll see this. His next question is, we saw data in the last meeting about EMS going inside and outside the USD. What does it look like for fire? But I don't know if you will have those numbers.
I actually did mention that because I went back and watched your all's meeting from a couple weeks ago, and I did bring that. So on the +1 that you all mentioned earlier, and remember, that's just a half mile, I say radius, it's not a radius, a half mile within within the USD and then out into the suburban. So the suburban agencies responded into the urban service district 108 times, and the urban service district responded into the suburban area 80 times. Shively did 27 times. They just kept that separate. So 80 times urban into suburban and 108 times. So it's pretty comparable. And like I said, we created that program, and my hat's off to our guys. I mean, that's worked great. I wish we could expand that further. I mean, because like I said, it's truly been able to save lives, and it's not only on fire responses, it's the highest level medical responses that those are dispatched as well. And I do have as well some data, and I can pass this on because I knew it was going to be requested, and I had Tyler, who gave you some data over the last couple months. But typically the fire service side, it's on average about a little over 22% that the fire apparatus leave their fire districts to go to another fire district. And that was in a 3-month period as well, same 3 months, April, May, and June. No, May, June, and July, I'm sorry, the same 3 months as I mentioned earlier. So I can pass this on through some type of avenue if you all would like to see this. It probably needs to be put a little bit better so you can understand it a little bit, but we can pass that along as well.
All right, one other question, and that is, what is the effect of a density on your service, your rendering of service?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, it wasn't, well worded. I'm trying to understand the ease of service, for example, in areas that are densely populated versus those that are sparsely populated. How does that affect your ability to respond, the ability or the need for other, for the, let's say the suburban areas to be more engaged? I'm just trying to understand how that figures into determining who responds to the call and how frequently they're out on call.
So the who is decided by our computer-aided dispatch. Once the call taker puts the information in, we have what's called an EMD, an emergency medical dispatch, that recommends whatever, if it's a broken leg or if it's a heart attack, it's going to send the appropriate responses through the technology to the dispatcher. So it recommends that. It's a pre-populated type of system that takes what the call taker's putting in and sends it. So they send the closest available ambulance, I guess, in this case. So typically a response lasts about an hour if they transport. That's getting to the hospital. That's turning it over to the patient. Now, the hospitals are very busy, so sometimes that goes a little bit longer. Sometimes you can get out a shorter amount of time from that, but typically, on average, it's about an hour.
Now, remember, my question has to do with the density of the population of the served area.
So it's demand. It's all about demand. It varies every day. It literally, I mean, you never know where the system is going to get busy at. Obviously, downtown is more populated, and that's more apt to get busy. But, like I said, we get busy all over the county.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question. Well, actually, I just have it could be a clarification. I think that you covered this at the beginning of your presentation, but what percentage is it that Metro EMS goes outside of the USD?
I've got that. Can I get that back to you instead of going through my papers here?
Sure.
Okay. I don't think I mentioned that earlier specifically.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would like to know because, countywide, I just am curious how often, what the percentage is that you go outside?
I've got numbers of how many times we go out, and I'll convert that into percentage.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, and I'll have the number of times as well, so you'll see both.
Great.
And I'll just pass that on with
That'd be great.
the fire data.
All right, and before we release you, if you have any further comments, you good?
No, like I said, I mean, it's, we've got a broken system. We've got a lot of good chiefs out there. Some are a lot better than others to work with, and we're trying to get the system built back together. Like I said, I appreciate you all allowing us to come on here and, answer any questions, clarify some things that may have happened over your last several meetings. And if there's anything else that you all need from us over the next, however long this commission's intact, just please let us know.
Appreciate it. I have one more question. Before I ask it, I owe you an apology. You said something that I strongly disagree with, and I think is unfair to the people I represent, but you are a serious person. You've done a great job. I just disagree with what you said, and I said it was a cute response. That's not appropriate. I could apologize in private, but that would be cowardly. So on the record, I want to say I apologize. I
Appreciate that and accept it. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate you for giving me for that. My question is, would it be better for you if you would allow, if we would just make EMS a USD service, and then we have these kind of the agreements like they have in fire?
I believe it would be more fragmented than it is right now if it was just that. And obviously Fairdale and Shively would be included in that at this point. But I believe it would be more fragmented. I'm not a fire-based EMS proponent. I'm a third service EMS proponent, just because I lived it back in the 90s when Louisville Fire took over Louisville EMS. And it was a very big struggle to work through for several years before they split it back up at merger at that time. So like I said, I think to do that, it would be more fragmented and we would be in more problems than we are right now.
So because I want to just show my cards, one of the things that I'm thinking of recommending right now is that we make your service as EMS a USD service, and then we would some kind of subsidize it and so forth for at least some time. So why would it make it more fragmented? It seems to me that you guys aren't providing the services for us anyway. We're doing it. So why wouldn't we just say, look, let's let the Louisville EMS do what they do. That's where their ambulances are. Focus on USD, and then we'll do the cross agreements and all that jazz. But let's just stop the fiction that Louisville EMS is providing services countywide, because it's not.
But it is to an extent, because we still go out into the urban service, out of the urban service district a lot. I mean, we really do. And if the data doesn't show that you all have right now, then I need to look at that to see that, because we do go out. Again, it's on the western side of the county a lot more than it is the eastern side of the county, because those are the more dense areas that get a lot busier. But, we do go out into the county a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask another hypothetical? I mean, based upon this, what we're kind of delving into, if Metro EMS had all 60 of their trucks available, would it be reasonable that the suburban cities could retire their EMS trucks? Because if we're paying taxes countywide, could the 60 trucks handle all of that?
Yes, they could.
Okay.
Yes. Because that's more trucks than we've got on the street right now between urban and, the suburban areas anyway.
Yeah.
You said, Julie, you're talking about the 60 trucks he already has?
Yeah, so if they enrolled all of the trucks, could the suburban cities, and this is a hypothetical, could the suburban cities retire their trucks and just have it be a full Louisville EMS?
So if we have the 60, why aren't we doing that?
Personnel.
Okay.
It's just it's a complete lack of personnel. What happened is the suburban agencies are paying much more than Metro EMS. So as they started coming on, it's literally a checker game, because people are leaving. When one department raises their rates, people leave to go to that department. Then the next department does it, and the same people leave to go to those departments. It's a checkerboard. One of the good things now that a couple of the departments are doing is they're having their own EMT classes. So we're not, I would have an EMT class or a paramedic class, and as soon as they graduate, they'd run and go to a suburban department. So we're not having that as much as we used to. So, like I said, there is some good agencies out there to work with. It's just a fragmented system, and it's a broken system, and we're working to try to make it better.
Mr. Chairman, a quick question. Do you have any idea if the outline, the suburban city EMS services are union or non-union? Because you said your tied up? You have a CBA, correct?
I know the firefighters are in the Professional Firefighters Union. I'm not sure if that includes EMS personnel or not, so I can't answer that. And, you know, one of the things too, and I know there was some, you know, you'd mentioned subsidizing, but, you know, we do a lot of services too for all these agencies with our radio system, the CAD system, and, you know, we don't charge any suburban agency other than, the only thing we charge for the radio system is if they need an expensive part for that radio. We don't charge labor. We don't charge any of that. Now, that's specifically not EMS, but it is emergency services within the same organization that we work for. Nope. Again, thank you all for the opportunity. Do we send the data to, okay. Sorry. Okay.
Brian's on. He'll get in touch with you.
Just get with Tyler and we'll let him know what you're going to be asking for.
And you also would like Dr. Coombs to supply you with his data? You had some questions as it related to the.
I'll go back to Tyler and see what he gave him, just to make sure that, I know it's accurate. I just didn't see exactly what format you all put it in.
Thanks. I think Jeff O'Brien is here and is prepared to offer some remarks.
Okay. Good afternoon, Commission. My name is Jeff O'Brien. I'm the Executive Director of the Louisville Metro Cabinet for Economic Development. I just want to talk to a little bit about economic development and follow up on some of the comments that Ms. Fleischaker made last week. I am a resident of a suburban city in 40207, so I'll just start off by saying that. And I just want to give a little bit more context and color around the question about the subsidy. So the data that Dr. Coombs has presented analyzed unemployment insurance records to track how much employees are paying in occupational taxes, and those records are tied to people's home addresses. I just want to say one thing about that. You can't divorce where jobs are and from where the revenue is generated. Even in a post-COVID hybrid world, that's just not an accurate way to look at this. Neighborhoods like Indian Hills and Fern Creek are not places where jobs are located. Again, I'm a resident in a suburban city. My income, my local occupational taxes are generated in downtown Louisville. I need services in my suburban city, and I need services where I work. So that's, you heard Ms. Fleischaker talk about 62,000 jobs that are created in this half square mile area of Jefferson County called downtown in the medical district. And all of the urban services district accounts for 39% of the jobs in Jefferson County, 31% of the population, but only 16% of the land area. So we've talked a little bit about this today. The density in the county matters. Investments in amenities in our urban core do not just benefit people that live in the urban core. Typically, Louisville has between 15 and 20 million visitors. 70% of those visitors come through downtown Louisville. Some of our biggest attractions are in the urban services district. So we all know Churchill Downs and the 150,000 or so people that come here for that fastest 2 minutes in sports every year. But 2.3 million people come to Nulu, East Market Street area. 1.1 million people visit the Louisville Zoo, and 1.2 million people visit the KFC Yum Center. These visits include not just tourists from out of town, but our own residents. 60% of the visitors to the Louisville Science Center that live in Jefferson County come from outside the urban services district. And just over half of the Jefferson County residents who visit Waterfront Park every year live outside the urban services district. The kind of activity that we generate in the urban services district requires investment in the services and infrastructure. Services like Director Myman provides at EMS, services like our LMPD, services like our road maintenance. The kind of so therefore it's not really accurate to say the urban services district is not self-sustaining. There's a well-known phrase in urban development: you can't be a suburb of nowhere. Now, let me just explain what that means. As I mentioned at the top, I'm a resident of a suburban city, but I assure you I could not be standing right here today if I did not travel my 7-mile journey on metro and state roads. My 7-mile journey includes 1/10 of a mile on a suburban city street. The next 6.9 miles occur on metro roads and state roads, all through metro intersections. Metro Public Works controls and maintains those traffic signals at those intersections. I can't even buy gas in the city that I live in. So if I need to get gas in my car, I've got to go to a gas station in the Urban Services District, or I've got to go to the formerly unincorporated area. Now, I know that's not a service that Metro provides, but just as an example. And a few weeks ago, we had a big storm that came through here, and we had a number of trees that were knocked down. One of the state roads that I have to use to get to work every day is wholly within the city limits with where I live. That city's contractor and the state contractors did not come out and clear those trees that were down across the street. Louisville Metro Public Works cleared those trees. So I think to the point that we've been talking about here, nickel and diming expenditures by geography is a slippery slope. Metro provides countless services to areas outside the urban services district. In the Economic Development Cabinet, we do building permitting, construction permitting, so inspections and permitting, keeping our buildings safe and keeping this county moving forward. 72% of those services occur outside the county or outside the urban services district. You heard about Jody talking about our central E91 dispatch system as well. It should be noted at the time of merger, the city of Louisville was the only beneficiary from the water company dividend when we talk about revenue sources and where revenue is coming from. That dividend now pays us $20 million. That dividend is shared throughout the county. And then in addition to that asset that's the Louisville Water Company coming in and bringing in the dividend, there is also the added benefit of free water to formerly county facilities. I think where we need to go here is we need more services across Louisville Metro. The whole point of merging city and county governments was to improve services across the county. And the work that folks like Jody and myself do every day is we work together with our suburban counterparts to find ways to solve problems. Instead of continuing to speak of divides, we should look at the way that we can continue to work together and improve those services. Now, I want to talk a little bit about our growth as a city, because this is important when we talk about tax base. We recently launched our Economic Development Strategic Plan within the Economic Development Cabinet with a group of 80 stakeholders across this community. When we look at our data, we see that we are growing very slowly, just 6% in the last 10 years. That's less than a point a year. That's not a recipe for success. When we look at our working age residents, people between 25 and 50 years old, we are seeing negative growth in that population. Places like Nashville, Columbus, Oklahoma City, Indianapolis are growing faster than us in those populations. Those are the people that create jobs for us. Of our peer cities, only Cincinnati and St. Louis are losing more population faster in that age group. When we think about education and bringing talented workforce in here, overwhelmingly our higher education facilities are located within the urban services district. So whether it's the University of Louisville, Simmons College of Kentucky, Bellarmine, JCTC, those places are important and are bringing those talented people to our community. We need to continue to invest in those vibrant urban centers to make sure that we attract that talent. As I said, 70% of our visitors are coming through downtown Louisville. That's important. That's giving them the first glimpse of this community. The fact that we have a unified government helps us get things done. We are unified. We are the 45th largest municipality in the country, and that helps us get noticed. For example, my cabinet right now is working on an economic development project that is bringing a technology-based group that's looking to invest nearly $500 million and bring several hundred high-paying tech jobs to this community. Anecdotally, that company said, among the other advantages that Louisville provides when we think about business growth, they were excited to hear that we had only one legislative body and one executive branch they would have to deal with when they came to doing business in the community. Now, I want to talk about capital investments and some of the data that we've talked about and some of the capital investments. So this is a tricky proposition, and I know some of this has gone around this week in emails, but when we look at the data and just going through the data that we received, and I took a very quick glance at it, but I'm going to name a couple of projects here. I'm going to hold up a couple of props. This is my stack of the FY24 approved budget, so you take my word for it that the ordinance is in here somewhere, but there it is, right there. I want to point out Ordinance 80, Series 2003, page 4, project number 67 as an example. The East Market Street New Loop project, this is definitely a project that is in the Urban Services District. I'm not going to argue that. It's listed, I believe, in the spreadsheet that Dr. Coombs provided at around a $10 million investment. That's approximately the number. But only $900,000 of Louisville Metro taxpayer dollars is in that project. The rest is bond fund. When I go back to Mayor Fisher's last budget, it's this document right here, we can see several other projects that were pointed out. There's $30 million noted in Dr. Coombs' spreadsheet for the Environ project. However, there's only $6 million of Metro funding that is for that. And the Environment Project will only get that $6 million if they raise $30 million from other sources, non-Metro sources. The way that that budget document is written is that we put those amounts in, whether it's a federal grant or a private source, so that we can keep track of the priorities of the mayor and the Metro Council. And we don't lose those pieces and we don't let $6 million go out the door. The merged city county government provides us with an opportunity to get more in federal funding, whether it's the American Rescue Plan, where we got $148 million more because of the merged government, or whether it's our annual CDBG allotment, which is based on our population. We talked about last week about what the state can do to help Louisville Metro. We talk about many things about tax structure and all those other things, but it's also about how we attract business to this community. Overwhelmingly statewide, our incentives are manufacturing based, which means we're going to get a lot of manufacturing jobs in this community. When we look at our industry clusters, that's where we see a lot of jobs. It's great that we have Ford and GEA and UPS that are working in this community, but we need a more knowledge-based economy too, especially when we look at the office buildings and the towers downtown. I'm sure everybody's heard about the empty office towers in downtown Louisville. We're not the only city that's suffering from that. But having incentives that look at a more knowledge-based economy is important. Talking about the road infrastructure, we've talked about the formula of fifths. That's not helping us keep up with the needs that we have in our community. We do go after the grant opportunities. In this budget document, you'll see a $20 million grant for 9th Street and a $6.2 million grant for Broadway all the way. Again, in that 9th Street project, only $5 million of that's Metro money. And the Broadway, only $750 is Metro money. So we are looking for ways to leverage grants, but those federal grants only get us so far, and they have special requirements. They're looking for us overwhelmingly to get to the CDBG eligible census tracts. So we need that in order to maintain those roads and keep up with growth in this community. And speaking of growth, I know I've heard a couple of comments about the Planning Commission and zoning here in this county. The Planning Commission, which is countywide, we supposedly approve everything. But the fact of the matter is we need over 31,000 affordable housing units to continue to grow our community. Our planning commissioners are, for the most part, residents of outside of the Urban Services District. So it's important to note that we need to think about our planning and zoning, but we also need to think about our standards that we're putting in planning and zoning. We need to work together with our legislators, with our council members, and with our residents to ensure that our planning and zoning standards meet modern day needs. At the end of the day, Louisville needs more resources. We need to work with our leaders, both in Jefferson County and statewide, to make sure that we have services for our residents across the county, whether they live in Valley Station, Anchorage, Clifton, J-Town, or Russell. Thank you all for the opportunity, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I have a question about, I agree, Jeff, I haven't seen you in a while. I think we spent a long time with Post-it notes together. I have a question about affordable housing. I agree that we probably do need more housing, but one of the comments that came from Valley Station was the fact that 500 or 600 apartments were going out there with no TARC service to the folks, no place to live. So they felt like we're building houses just to be building houses. What consideration is taken into when we say we need that housing? Are we making sure that we got a TARC bus, or we got a job, or the way that the 23% of the growth is in the unincorporated or outside the worst. And we want people to work downtown, or we want people to work somewhere, but we keep building houses for folks. How are they going to pay for it? How are they going to get there, and where are they going to go to work? Is that part of the planning when we talk about a lot of houses that need to be built or apartments?
Yeah, I think a couple of things about that. Again, the data says that over 80% of our commuters are driving alone to work every day. More than 80% of our commuters, and that's probably gotten worse since COVID. That's a pre-COVID number. We look at TARC service. There are other things more important when we think about housing than just TARC service, though. It's, do we have the adequate water and sewer infrastructure? Sewer infrastructure is what drives density, not transportation networks, not bus service, not water service. Sewer service drives density. So when we think about that, and I'm not saying that we're making planning decisions based on sewer service, but that's where developers are saying they can put a piece of property on. We are looking at those things when we look at planning commission. Right now, we have a study that my planning team is undertaking to identify places in the county where more density is appropriate. One of the things they will be looking at is the capacity of the road network, the capacity of the water and sewer infrastructure network, and the capacity of our transit network to accommodate the new growth. So we expect that we'll be making zoning changes from then. Our land development code right now, does anybody here know what our standard is for road capacity in our land development code? It's an 18-foot wide road. That's adequate road capacity. Sometimes, if we see that the development is directly going to need a traffic signal at its entrance, or is going to need a turn lane at its entrance, we will be able to get the developer to do that. Sometimes, if they're asking for a rezoning, which is not very often, especially in the eastern parts of our county, we can ask for a little bit more than that. But we have a very property rights-based zoning ordinance right now. We're in the process of modernizing our standards. However, as you can imagine, it's pretty hard to get engineering firms to come up with capacity standards that might impact their future work. So we're trying to develop not only these areas of where we think rezoning is most appropriate, but also what should our standards be beyond just an 18-foot roadway.
Marion.
Councilman Arthur had some questions that he passed to me before he left. His question is, in one of our commission meetings, we got a chart that claimed 2/3 of capital project funding between fiscal years 12 and 22 happened in 2 zip codes, 40202 and 3. I asked researchers to review that, and they came back with data showing that the Urban Service District received half the capital project funding, not 2/3. But this week, I received a note that the Urban Service District actually received only about 1/5 of the capital project funding. Can you confirm and explain the different numbers here?
I believe that the data around the capital projects, as I mentioned earlier, is overinflated. That's because the federal or state or private dollars that are going into the capital projects is reported, and that's not been driven out of the numbers. I suspect that our Office of Management and Budget, again, I had my knowledge because I was provided with the data and I looked at it very quickly and was familiar with the number of the projects. But I do believe that can be broken out. And so while I would suspect that the number is somewhere between 1/5 and 40%, roughly, but I don't suspect it's over 40%.
Okay.
So I'll make sure I understand. You don't think that over 40% is?
I don't think that more than 40% of capital expenditures have occurred within the Urban Services District.
Really?
Again, the projects that I noted here, it's about $50 million of overestimating what metro dollars are going there. We don't always get to say what projects are going to be federal grant eligible or successful at the federal grant level. They have a number of initiatives at USDOT or Department of Justice that are driving where we can have projects that will command federal dollars. So another project, the Beecher Terrace infrastructure costs, which are listed on the spreadsheet at $15 million. This was a 5-year allocation that the city of Louisville put its CDBG, our Community Development Block Grant dollars towards. Those are wholly federal dollars. They don't require a match. We get them because of our population, so they're entitlement dollars. But that's reported as those urban services probably went directly into District 4 or 4020, I believe it's 40203 right there.
But those CDBG dollars also have to meet economic guidelines.
Correct.
To be spent in that district.
Correct.
Not,
Guidelines regarding the income of the residents,
correct,
correct? Yeah.
correct.
And that's $50 million out of over $1 billion, is that right?
Right.
Okay. And you think that?
That's
70% to between 25 and 40?
I think that's 5 projects that I pulled out just glancing at something on 10
It'd be
minutes.
great if the OMB would give us that information. We've asked for it a number of times.
Yeah, I think that's really critical, because, a lot of conclusions are being drawn based on information, and if it's not accurate, we really need to to change it.
Another one of those projects in there would be Liberty Green, which was again CDBG dollars, can only be spent in certain census tracts that meet those economic guidelines.
Yes.
I completely agree with you that we need a vibrant downtown, 100%. My question is, why do you think we've had a hemorrhaging of jobs into outside the USD?
So I think when you think about our, well, let me go back. I'm an urban planner by trade. So historically speaking, urban development patterns have changed over time. So earlier in the meeting, there was a discussion around TARC. Our TARC service is focused downtown. Our TARC service is also focused on streetcar lines that were laid out in the 1920s. The population in this county has shifted. The population in every urban city has shifted for the most part. Maybe New York City is a little different. But I think what we've seen is jobs not being hemorrhaged, but jobs growing in other parts of the county. Other job centers have grown up around the county. We talk about GE Appliances in the south end. We talk about the Kentucky Truck Plant out on Westport Road, the Churchill Downs office and Shelbyhurst on Hurstbourne Parkway. I think it's good that we have jobs across the county. I think overwhelmingly when we think about job centers and where density wants to be, we're just talking about Valley Station a little bit ago and the concerns about putting additional housing in Valley Station. And we hear those concerns. Again, we have standards that don't necessarily align with that, but we need good jobs and good housing throughout this county. So I'm not denying that people don't want to live in the suburban areas. I live in the suburban area of the county. So I think that I think that jobs are just naturally moving around the community. I think as population has shifted to the suburban areas, we've seen jobs shift to the suburban areas. I think areas that were formerly seen as rural parts of our county have become urban parts of our county. One of the most vibrant job centers that we have is at Hurstbourne and Shelbyville Road. That area was a farm field 50, 60 years ago, right? So I think that it's important that we see those shifts and we continue to see growth. We're going to continue to see that growth pushing east too, to our east and certainly to our south with the major investment in Glendale. So I think that's a natural growth. I think that there's going to be some additional disruptions in the office market from the COVID world. And I don't think anybody quite knows how that's going to shake out locally or globally. I will tell you that from our data about downtown Louisville had about a 19% office vacancy rate pre-COVID. We are slightly higher than that now. Places like San Francisco had a 3% office vacancy rate pre-COVID, and they're running about 30% right now. So while we've seen a decline in our office uses, we've not seen the sort of dramatic declines that other places have seen. What we are seeing is people downsizing their office spaces, but that's happening not just in downtown Louisville, that's happening in our other office parks. And we've got to think about that as a city and as a state, how we want to preserve those work centers.
Thank you. And then, so to your point, which we agree that we need a vibrant downtown, 100%. Your answer is that we have just a normal attrition out into the suburban areas, which I agree. I mean, we are growing rapidly in the county outside the USD. I think the charge of this committee is to come to terms with that growth. We are not seeing services keep pace with that. We are still seeing the 20-year-old tax system that we started out merger with, but we're not seeing any sort of movement on the services side in the county. And so that's why we're here. But I agree with you. I think that, you know, if I could contribute to helping make downtown more vibrant, all about it. But we have to come to terms with the reality that our suburban areas are exploding and we don't have any services, and we have to come to terms with that reality.
I agree with that. I think that as I said, I think we need more services across our county. I think our residents deserve and demand more services here. I think when I travel across the country and look at other cities, and I look at Louisville, I see other cities that have things like, you know, nice things like flowers along their interstate highways. And we don't have that here. And I know that Louisville Metro doesn't manage the state highways, so I get that. But, you know, those are the things that when we were trying to attract business to this community, some of those things that we need to think about in terms of the advantages that we have as a merged city-county government, those things are important to us. And I think we just need to find a way to continue to work together to improve those services across the county. I'm not denying that we need more services across the county, but I also think that you know, when we think about where our opportunities are to grow revenue, in a lot of places it's through our visitors, and 70% of those visitors are coming into our urban neighborhoods, not just downtown, but neighborhoods like the Highlands, Crescent Hill, Clifton, Old Louisville. Those places are seeing a lot of visitors too, and you look at our debate at Metro Council at Airbnb. Councilwoman Fowler has been a part of that. So,
Senator Nemes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Mr. O'Brien, for being here. I know you're economic development, not necessarily housing. But I have a question. And after I kind of correct the mayor there as he's talking about homes and houses, we're doing our best to take care of the immediate need of low-income housing. But the way to get out of poverty is to have low-income houses. You said we're building houses. We are not. We're building apartments. Is there any kind of development to, like, you talk about Valley Station, Valley Village, and say even Cloverleaf, are low-income, or were started as low-income housing? As a matter of fact, when I was born, I started the Iroquois projects, and my mother and father were able to move to low-income houses in Valley Village. That's the way to get out of poverty, is to own something of your own. Are we doing anything to try to do that for people?
yes, we actually are trying to do quite a lot on that. And you'll see a little bit of it. We often talk about the vacant and abandoned property problem that we have in the city. We have about, at any given time, we have about 3,000 to 5,000 vacant and abandoned properties in the city. Most of them are focused in the west end and the near south end. So looking at ways that we can unlock those properties, the city only owns 500 to 600 of those properties. A lot of the remaining are owned by private owners. Most of them are deceased. Most of them are vastly underwater with tax liens and other sorts of liens. And the state legislature, we've been you all have been very kind to us on adjusting the rules on how we handle foreclosures and passing other legislation around conservatorships to try to unlock that potential to build new houses, and houses that are affordable for people that have working class jobs, people making up to 80% of our area median income. So that's one thing we're trying to do. We're also looking at new owners for new models for home ownership. So thinking about community land trusts, and that's an instance we think about a traditional condo building. Well, think about it as condo building, but single family homes where the land is owned in common, but the individual homes are owned by individuals. And having the land owned in common reduces the cost of the housing. It still allows the owner to build up equity and build wealth when they sell the home, but that equity that they can build is capped because of that land trust, and they sign up for that upfront. So there are a number of things that we're looking at. That area has gotten increasingly difficult as private investors have come into the market and bought up vast swaths of rental housing. And that's occurred in almost every neighborhood in this city where people have bought up housing for rentals to flip at very high rates or flip for Airbnbs, short-term rentals. So those sorts of things. So those are things we're working on. We're getting ready to release an affordable housing plan, which will talk about how we get to more home ownership. And additionally, the mayor and Metro Council over the past 3 years have put a significant amount of funding into our down payment assistance program, which is a program where we give people a partially loan, a partially grant to buy and purchase their own home. It's their first home. They've got to be income qualified, but it's their first home. We're not buying people's second homes or vacation homes or things like that. So there's a number of things we're trying to do to get people into houses.
Is KHC kind of defunct?
You know, KHC has been they're a big help to us on that. They help us quite a bit on the, on apartments. Apartments are important. I mean, I think.
Let's get them on to the houses.
Yeah. Yeah, houses are a little bit more difficult. We're still working with private development.
Well, I thank you, and I'd like to talk to you more about that.
Absolutely, Senator.
I know we have done all we could at the General Assembly. If there's other things we need to do or we can do, let us know.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate your presentation. I got a couple of things I want to talk about, and affordable housing was the main one, but I really want to work with you guys on the new age workforce. I think that's really important and exciting that we can, to the extent that we need to have state incentives or state law changes, I want to be helpful in that. I would note that I'm not going to go into much of this. I can talk offline on the kind of stuff that I want to talk about, but we're competing with Southern Indiana, with Oldham County, Shelby County, Bullitt County, others on suburbs, right? So I represent some of Oldham County, about 20% of Oldham County and some of Shelby County. Many of the people that I represent are Louisvillians, but they left because of whatever, a lot of it's a school district, but some of it is that we don't believe that the services are provided. We have a number of places in Jefferson County that do not have MSD service. They don't have sewage services. And so why wouldn't they move to Oldham County? Well, I want them to stay here, and so do you. And so we have to, it's not, I don't think that as Julie was saying, I don't think the services on these suburbs are taken as seriously as they need to be. And with respect to the jobs, and this was one of the most stunning things I saw out of all of this. I don't know if you heard this information, but of people who live inside the USD who are workers, half of them work outside the USD. 41,100 and 41,700 work inside the USD. And people who live in the rest of the county, a third of them work inside the USD, 2/3 work outside the USD. So my mind was always, because I was a lawyer, worked in a big building downtown, go in the mornings, go out. Yeah, that's not true. Not true. So most of our jobs, the overwhelming majority of our jobs, are not in the USD. Which city do you live in, by the way?
City of Indian Hills.
Indian Hills. Okay. I just wanted to know. I lived in one called Wellington. Great. These are all wonderful cities. And so those are the main things I wanted to say. But I do have one question. I've asked this of everybody. Nobody's been able to answer it. And if you can't, please find somebody that can. Because I've always heard this thing, and it has to be true because everybody says it, but nobody's ever been able to put meat on the bones. If you have 600,000 people or 700, 800, it's better because it allows us to get more money. So when we have more places incorporate, it takes money, it takes numbers of people off of our Louisville Metro rolls. And then the next statement is always said that hurts us in our ability to get money. And then I've said, how? And I've never had an answer to that. The answers that I've been given are, well, the state road funds. But that's not right because the state road funds, then rather than go to Louisville Metro, some of them go to Middletown, some of them go to J-Town, but they stay within the county. So that's not true. So what dollars could our county, all the jurisdiction in our county, be eligible for that we're not now because of incorporation? And I've asked that. 100 people have said the statement that you said earlier. Nobody's given me a particular. So please, somebody put some meat on the bone because I'm starting to believe it's not true. So do you know the answer to that question?
Are you talking about my statement about the ARP funds?
Just in general, what dollars could we get inside this county if we didn't have any suburban cities or so forth?
I don't know that that would be the case, that we could get more funds if we eliminated all the suburban cities. That's not, by the way, that's not what I would suggest at all. I think that there are some losses that metro government, because I'm not talking about Jefferson County, I'm talking about the organization that's metro government. Metro government could lose funding on the if certain areas incorporate. However, there's no.
And that's like state road fund dollars.
And I believe the insurance premium tax is one too.
Okay, but that all comes from within. That's not the argument.
Right. I've not heard the argument that with the ARP funds, given that we had not just the old city of Louisville funding, but also the former unincorporated areas, we were able to pull down more funding because of that. But the elimination of the suburban cities, I don't think would change that equation. If a area that was that is currently a CDBG eligible census tract incorporated, the metro government could lose some of its CDBG allocations.
Spell that out for me.
Community Development Block Grant.
I know that, but what does that mean in particular?
That funding is, so annually Louisville Metro receives between 11 and 12 million dollars because of our population base from HUD through that CDBG program.
Right.
We are an entitlement city, so we don't have to do any application for it. The
entitlement city because of our population.
Because of our population size. It's been a long time since I've read this. I believe the cutoff is 50,000 residents. So if a large area of our city are incorporated, we could lose CDBG dollars. That's one example. There might be others as well, but I'm happy to.
Yeah, I'd like to hear as much of that as we can because I've heard it a lot. And and Jerry Abramson said at our first meeting, and I think that's what we've always heard. It wasn't just from him. That was one of the major reasons we needed to incorporate. But I've always asked that follow-up question: what are we eligible for that we weren't before, or what will we? And I've never heard that. But $100 is one.
And in terms of eligibility, I want to take it back just from eligibility, but let's talk about prestige, which is not meaning more fund. Being a top 50 metro does matter for in a top 50 population-wise city. That does matter to us. I mean, right now, the way that the merger is set up, the way that we count ourselves, we count all the population metros, so the full 800,000 people, not just the 600 or 1,000 or so that live in the old city of Louisville and the formerly unincorporated areas.
So when we talk about being a top 50 city, we do include everybody.
Yes, we do include that, and that's important because again, to get on some of these lists for site selectors, people that come and bring business to us, they look at that, and overall population size is important for those sorts of things.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask a quick question, Mr. O'Brien. If the total population were included in the block grants, total population, would those funds still be allocated to those areas that are needed?
Yes, that's a federal HUD regulation. HUD says where we can and cannot spend the CDBG dollars.
Okay. Thanks.
Cindy.
Yes, thank you. Hey.
Hey, Councilman.
So I'm going to say it one more time about TARC and the west-east connection from Valley Station PRP. I mean, I don't understand how we can continue to approve these huge apartment complexes on South Dixie when there's no sidewalks, no TARC service. I mean, you've got TARC service maybe once or twice a day, but you can't get them safely to the highway. And, and we don't have, I mean, if there's one that's being proposed right now that will make over 1,000 doors in an 1/8 of a mile emptying onto Dixie Highway without a stoplight. And I'm going to fight with everything I have to stop that from happening because people are dying on Dixie.
Again, that's when I talk about more services, we think about our our bus, we think about our sidewalks, we think about our curbs and gutters when you come into parts of our city, whether it's suburban or urban. I mean, it's, our traffic signals hang on wires. I mean, those are things that we need to think about is what, are we a first-class US metropolitan area? Are we a mid-size, Midwestern, middle of the country manufacturing town? And not that there's anything wrong with either of those things, but I think Louisville sees itself as the former and not the latter. I think that's what a lot of us want to see. So TARC, as I said, based on 1920s streetcar lines, that was 100 years ago. We dug up a bus when we did a transportation plan 5 years ago. We dug up a bus map of 1951 bus routes. You know what the route was that ran out to Middletown? Number 31. It looks exactly the same that it looked today. That's lots. I mean, I don't know. Maybe a couple of you were born in 1951, but that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Shelbyville Road's changed a hell of a lot.
So, and then another question I've got is, who's keeping track of how many affordable housing units are being built in and around the city? I mean, don't we need 30,000, 31,000? How many have we got so far?
Our Housing and Community Development Department keeps track of how many subsidized units we have across the city. I will have a great answer for you on that question at the very beginning of next year. We're updating our housing needs assessment, which was done in 2019 and gave us that 31,000 number. So we are going to see exactly where we are in a couple of months.
That doesn't help me when these proposed plans are coming forward and, for huge apartment complexes that are,
Well, if I were taking a very, very, very conservative swing at that number, I would guess that we've maybe chopped off 1,000 of those units.
1,000? There's proposed 1,000 in just a 1/8 of a mile on Dixie Highway.
Our average rent in 2019 was $770. Our average monthly rent now is around $1,200. So we've seen affordability erode as time has gone on.
Okay, so why are we approving all of these affordable units and complexes when they're really not affordable? All they're doing is
We're approving affordable housing units because we need more affordable housing.
But they're not affordable. You're just saying that, the amount of money they're charging monthly. So if they're charging $1,300 for a one-bedroom apartment, that's not affordable to people that are on that median income.
So a couple things. That's our average rent. So whether it's an apartment or a single family home, that's our average rent. So it breaks down more. I'd have to dig into the details more on what exactly it is, but those units that we are approving that are tax credits, so that's funded through KHC, our tax credit deals. Those projects are affordable for people that are making up to 60% of area median income generally. Those rents are going to be closer to that $700 a month range.
Okay, so I have a sliver of QCT going through my district, running parallel with Dixie Highway on the east side. I mean, how can we promote or hopefully inspire the developers to build some affordable homes that can be purchased as opposed to inundating every blade of grass with apartments?
Really, the answer to that is make it financially attractive to them, make it easy for them to build the housing. Our tools, this is not a Louisville problem, this is not a Kentucky problem. Our tools nationwide favor apartment complexes that are 2 to 300 units.
Because it fattens their pockets more, not because it's the right thing to do. And then, again, the Planning Commission is continuing to just go down that road and approving everything. And I mean, we've got to put the brakes on it a little bit, So you're saying that there's only 1,000 affordable units out of all of these complexes that we're building?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we had if you were asked, the question that I thought I was being asked was, how much progress have we made towards that 31,000 affordable housing unit number? I'm saying I think it's 1,000 because we've built a lot of units, but we've also seen some units that were affordable in 2019 become unaffordable in 2023.
Then again, somehow or the other, we have to put the brakes on what the planning commission is doing on approving all of these plans that really are not affordable.
The planning commission it's a law of supply and demand. It's not, the planning commission is trying to increase the supply. The hardest thing to build in this county, or any county in the United States, is housing. Hardest thing to get approved.
When you're talking about housing, you're talking about apartments as well?
I'm talking about all housing. Louisville Metro builds two types of housing developments for the most part. 200-unit apartment buildings or 100-unit subdivisions of homes itself for more than $300,000. That's what gets approved in this county overwhelmingly. Because that's where people can either make money on the private market or projects that will qualify well for KHC's tax credits.
And Mr. O'Brien, so I don't disagree with that. Let me suggest this, and this is a global suggestion, I think, to everybody, and hopefully this is a very bipartisan. We understand that. But let's be the leader in the world, in the country, because we all agree, Republican, Democrat, suburban, USD, it doesn't matter, that the way that is what's best for our people. If they want to live in an apartment their whole life, beautiful, wonderful, go for it. If they want to go, if they have the means and they want to buy I think the 300,000 or higher neighborhoods that you just suggested, wonderful, great. But we have to, and I know that the developers don't want to do this because just what you said, they can't make as much money. But we have to allow our young families, older families, whatever, all our people, get into that ownership. That's not only better because of our infrastructure usages, but that's the way forward for our people if we want to get generational wealth. So let's really, not on this commission, but let's really focus on that and be the leader in the world and how we can figure out to let our lower class residents become owners. I don't know the answers. But let's be really ingenuitive.
And to be
whatever
clear,
the right word is about that.
And to be clear, if I had the answers, I would not be standing right
know
here right now. So, but I think that, like I said, this is something that we are working toward, and it is a range of solutions. Like I said, we have got to find a way to find that middle. And again, I just want to assure you all, we are not the only city struggling with finding that middle for that family for that working family that.
We found it before.
Yeah.
Valley Village,
yeah.
Portions of Linden, Camp Taylor. We found it before. Yeah. Let's do it again. Let's get those neighborhoods and make them vibrant and not just throw up apartments everywhere. Apartments are part of the solution, but my goodness, it seems to me that they're the only solution that we've got right now.
So can I interject? So Watson Lane is one thing that I see as a real opportunity to further home ownership if we can do the perimeter of that property. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they can buy the house. The center of the property is going to be a community center and affordable senior housing. But, we should be looking for those opportunities to, because that's how we end up getting families with institutional wealth. I mean, it's just.
And I think overwhelmingly we are looking for those. That's a unique opportunity for us. And I think the foresight of the mayor and the Metro Council to put that in our budget this year. And I know that you and Marilyn Harris are working very closely on getting that RFP together. But those are the sorts of things we need to do. But government can only demonstrate that. I don't think government can buy every piece of property that comes on the private market. And I think if we continue to show that and then model that in our development code, say, hey, these are the things that it's going to be easy to build. These are the things that's going to be hard to build. And here, if you want to build apartments, here are the places where it's easy to build apartments.
Right. Well, and that was the whole idea behind that was that neighborhood didn't need 10 three-story apartment buildings on that piece of property. They needed something to bring the community together, not divide it. So, and I've got to give Mayor Greenberg kudos on that because I sprung the idea, he ran with it, and I am very grateful because it's going to make a difference for those people. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further, Mr. O'Brien?
No, again, thank you all for your time this evening, and I really appreciate it and appreciate the opportunity to present in front of you.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your remarks. By the way, on the question of the additional data on breaking down the capital budget, I do think, I hope that proceeds and you can work with the commission, whether that's with Dr. Coons or whomever, to revise those numbers. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, are we setting another meeting?
I'm sorry?
Are we setting another meeting?
Yeah, well, now we have a meeting set now for September the 8th. That's our next regularly scheduled meeting, the second Friday of each month. But we do have to consider the question, and I guess this is a good time as any to do that, of whether or not that's the last meeting. What are we doing between now and the 8th of September? To what extent do the committees themselves and/or we as a committee of the whole need to get together to focus on the question of what is the content of the recommendation, the final report? How do we do that? Do we each retire to ourselves and then come to a body of the whole and say, I suggest we add this, that, and the other? Do we do that by committee? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
We have to be done in 2 weeks, is that right? 2 weeks is the 8th.
Yes.
I don't think we can meet on just the 8th. I think we need to meet before then, probably next Friday, and then come with recommendations. And I don't know if we're going to vote. I don't know exactly the thing you and I need to speak about what that looks like, but I don't think we can wait to meet to the 8th.
Yeah, I think that it probably makes sense for Jason and I to sort of get together and sort of at least come to you all with a proposal of how this might proceed. And obviously you guys can say, we don't care for that or tweak it this way or that. But I think that that's probably the best thing we can do at this point.
And I would suggest, Earl, that, Mary, will you raise your hand?
I was going to suggest if all of us make a commitment by Tuesday to email Brian our recommendations, I would imagine if he can put them together in an Excel file of some sort or Word, whatever, I'd imagine 80% of our recommendations are going to be the same.
Probably.
And if we can get that out of the way, that's got a good portion done. But everyone's got to commit to doing that and emailing him by Monday or, Tuesday morning by noon so he can get it back out.
And then to meet next Friday, you think? Is that what you're thinking?
And that's the question. Are we meeting before the 8th?
You and I need time to finish the work.
Right, yes.
That they tell it, that the commission tells us is the commission's report.
But if everyone makes that commitment to get it to him, even if it's Monday by noon, so he can turn around and get it to you guys, I would imagine a good portion of those recommendations are going to be the same.
That's good. And then I think we can open the floor for additional recommendations on the 1st, but let's try to do that.
Or massage, whatever.
Yep. So that's the 29th. Close the business 29th. So Mary Ann's saying, get an email to Brian by, let's say 11:59 on the 29th.
By noon. Just say by
By
noon.
noon? Woo, okay.
You've got all weekend.
I understand. I haven't seen my kids in 2 weeks. Okay.
No, Monday at noon, just email your recommendations.
All right. So Monday at noon, the 28th, get email your recommendations.
I got a problem with that because I'm sorry, guys, but I've got Monday and Tuesday for me are kind of like swamped. I can do it maybe Tuesday evening, but I can't do it Monday or before noon on Tuesday.
Okay. By end of Tuesday, that gives us 2 days to look at them. Email to Brian with recommendations that you have. It doesn't mean that's the only recommendations that we can make, but try to get them in if you can. We're going to meet on the 25th at 3:00. Nope. That's what I meant to say. The 25th is today. Next Friday,
September 1st.
September 1st. Yep. The 29th by end of business day. Or into the evening, because I think Earl said he needs the evening. So just on the 29th, send your email to Brian. And then we'll meet on the 1st at 3:00. I see no objection, hear no objections there. And then we're going to have to, that's when hopefully we'll get enough information so Earl and I can have our instructions and then get the final report recommendations together. Then when we meet on the 8th, we can bless it or say, no, you got to move this comma around or whatever. That sound right? And I'm going to make some suggestions. I think that maybe we've looked into some things that we're not ready to say, hey, legislature, make this particular change. But we think, and I'm going to mention one, like the PVA matter. I have grave concerns on the PVA issue, but I don't think we're anywhere near ready to make a recommendation. So I think we can put a pin in that in our report and say, that we're, make a recommendation to continue, that needs to be, continue to be looked at. All right.
Okay, we are adjourned.